Chapter 43. Quenil had specially arranged a single room for Cylin. Not long after Cylin was sent to the medical room on the space plane, the sounds of intense fighting and the rumble of heavy weapons resounded from below. It would seem that the big black mouse had gone mad. Judging from the sound and the distribution of firepower, the black mice were no longer attacking in an organized manner like before. The leader's confused thinking had seriously affected their movements. "Yo, it looks like the final battle has begun," a medic who was treating Cylin's wounds said. Their tone had relaxed a little when they heard their colleagues say that the crisis was almost over. The medical reinforcement ship had already arrived at the space station outside the planet, and some emergency medicine had been sent over as well. By the time the situation here was more or less settled, the remaining medics on the ship would probably be sent over to help. "Yeah, Chief Hua has this victory in his grasp," a medic who had delivered the medicine said. The medic looked at Cylin, who was lying on the bed, and asked, "Are you a student too?" Cylin nodded. The medic made a strong gesture. "I heard from my comrades that all of you are pretty good. However, that academy called Hard is a bit of a pity." "Hard? What happened to him?" Cylin was shocked. Indeed, he hadn't heard anything about Hard until now. "He's in the ICU. I heard that he suffered a few claws while trying to save his teammates. He also sustained a few more injuries in the later battles. The antiserum he injected didn't work, and the rat poison had already seeped into his internal organs. I heard that he won't last much longer," the medic said regretfully. "He was just a student in his teens. To them, he was just a child. It was truly commendable that he could participate in this battle bravely and not abandon his comrades under such circumstances." Cylin jumped off the bed. "Which room is he in?" "The third emergency room from the right upstairs at the corner." "Sigh, your wounds haven't, I won't die." Cylin ignored the medical staff beside him and walked out of the ward to go upstairs. Walking upstairs, without looking at the room number, Cylin saw a few soldiers with bandages standing at the door. They were probably Hard's team members. There was also a person squatting with his back against the wall, holding his head and crying hoarsely. That was Surd. At this moment, the door of the intensive care unit opened. The doctor walked out and rubbed his forehead tiredly. "I'm sorry, it's still not working. The serums we've injected are all useless." He was very strong, and his obsession was very deep. It was already very good that he had been able to last until now. "You guys, go take a look at him. He can hold on for 5 more minutes at most." Surd and a few of his team members practically rushed in. When they saw Hard, whose entire body was starting to turn black and fester, they rubbed their eyes, took a deep breath, and walked to Hard's side. Hud was wearing an oxygen mask, and it was obvious that he was having difficulty breathing. His eyes were so swollen that his original outline could not be seen clearly. Through the gaps of his slightly opened eyelids, Hud could vaguely see a few people beside him. Now, not only was his vision severely blurred, even his hearing was greatly reduced. But he knew who these people were. He knew who they were just by looking at the blurry figures. Hud could not make a sound, and Cylin could only know what Hud was saying by the shape of his mouth. "I don't want to die. It's okay, you won't die. Didn't you say that you want to be a general? When the time comes, you'll go back and look down on those stards who made sarcastic remarks." Surd's voice was trembling, and he was almost roaring. The tears at the corner of Hud's eyes were bloodshot when they fell, and they dripped onto the white pillow. He knew very well what was waiting for him. There was not much time left, but he really wanted to go back now. Even if it was to communicate with his family, it would be fine. But the distance was too far, and by the time the communication signal was transferred, it would already be too late. Looking at the gaze in Hud's eyes, Cylin knew that even at this moment, Hud still did not regret it. He did not want to die, but he did not regret it. Diaz had once said, "In the army, on the battlefield, the general was responsible for commanding, and the soldiers were responsible for dying. But soldiers had their glory, and they had their beliefs. They would die without regrets." Raising his hand, Cylin placed his finger on Hud's hand. It looked like he was giving his comrade one last encouragement. But in fact, Cylin was analyzing the toxins in Hud's body, and then synthesizing specific antibodies based on these toxins. He secreted the specific antibodies from his fingertips, and they seeped under Hud's skin through his pores, and through his blood circulation or other means, they were transmitted to various parts of HUD's body. Surd, who had been trying hard to decipher what HUD was trying to express, saw that HUD's eyes had suddenly closed tightly, and his lips were no longer moving. Instantly, his tears flowed out. Scylla used his hand to poke Surd, who was immersed in grief and wiping his tears. "He's just asleep. Look at the heartbeat shown on the device." Surd, it seemed like he really had fallen asleep. 5 minutes later, the heartbeat was still there. 10 minutes later, it seemed like it was beating even stronger than before. After Scylla was certain that HUD's life was not in danger, he patted Surd's shoulder and said, "Call the healer over. HUD's vitality is probably too tenacious that even Azrael wouldn't take him in." Oh, Surd was still a little absent-minded. He called the healer over according to Scylla's words. Looking at the medics who were clicking their tongues in wonder, Scylla shook his head and left. But Scylla did not return to the sick room. Instead, he went to the temporary analysis room. There were some researchers who were busy working there. Some of them had escaped from the base earlier, and some of them had come with a medical ship as support. But until now, they had only managed to analyze a dozen or so toxins and antibodies. Many of the soldiers who were scratched and infected by the black mice were still waiting for the unknown antiserum that could detoxify them. Scylla sighed. He had really overestimated them. Right now, he really did feel the same disappointment he felt when he looked at the other researchers in Seven Lights Institute of Mechanical Engineering. "Hey, who are you? Hurry up and leave. This is not a place for you warriors. You have absolutely no regard for discipline and don't know what's good for you. Don't interfere with our work." Scylla ignored whatever these people were saying and walked straight to a molecular synthesis analyzer. He grabbed the researcher sitting there by the collar and pulled him away. The man raised his eyebrows and was about to say something, but Scylla did not even look at him. Instead, he took out a handgun and aimed it at the man's mouth. The moment they saw Scylla take out his gun, the surroundings immediately quieted down. The few people near the door ran out to call for the soldiers. Sitting down in front of the instrument, Scylla swept a glance at the case on the operation panel and then stopped looking at it. His eyes were glued to the screen, and he withdrew his gun to free his hands. His fingers pressed on the operation panel, and the buttons he pressed were absolutely accurate, as if he was very familiar with the instrument. His hand speed grew faster and faster, and he looked incomparably practiced. Not only that, the researchers in the room realized that the instruments in front of them had begun to operate on their own, and the analyzed data was automatically transmitted to Scylla's instrument. In such a short amount of time, this bastard had actually taken control of every instrument in the analysis room. A few researchers began to criticize Scylla for his nonsense. But gradually, all the researchers in the analysis room fell silent. Molecular formulae were taking shape on the screen of Scylla's instrument, and the data displayed beside the rotating molecules was enough for everyone to understand that they did not have the right to make a sound right now. 1, 2, 3. They had no idea how Scylla did it at all. All they could see was the molecular diagrams of almost 100 antibodies displayed on the screen. Chapter 44. Analyzing and determining a correct antibody required more than 5 people to work at the same time, and it would take at least 3 hours. How long had it been since Scylla entered the room? Less than 30 minutes. This guy had used less than 30 minutes, and it was more than 7 times more than the 50 people in the analysis room combined for more than half a day. What kind of concept was this? How many things could a person's brain process at the same time? What was the limit? The researchers did not know, because all the answers they knew were rejected by the young man in front of them. Just the images on the screen that changed so quickly was enough to make them dizzy. One man, one pair of hands, controlling more than 30 instruments in the analysis room, analyzing and verifying data at the same time. Through multiple parameter calculations and probability analysis, he had obtained 100 antibodies in less than 30 minutes. Scylla ignored the stupefied researchers. He transferred the conclusion he obtained to the synthesizer and inputted the parameters. He separated the antibodies obtained from the synthesizer and labeled the type and dosage. The researchers who ran out earlier and the soldiers who were called over stood quietly at the door and watched Sillin busy himself in front of the synthesizer. Sillin turned his head and glanced at them. "What are you still standing there for? Take these synthesized antibodies and use them first. If one doesn't work, try another one. Try them one by one. There's bound to be something that works. The antibodies can be stacked." The soldiers who came over reacted a little faster. After all, the injured and needy person was their comrade. He placed the synthesized antibodies into boxes according to their labels, saluted Sillin, and then quickly left the place. Sillin let out a long sigh when the antibodies were all synthesized. He had spent a lot of energy in this 1 hour. Not only did he have to process the data from more than 30 instruments at the same time, he also had to add in some of the parameters he obtained from the underground cave. There was no doubt that the computational load had increased. To be on the safe side, Sillin added a couple of antibodies that were related to the big black mouse's poison. At the same time, he also modified a dozen or so antibodies so that their side effects would be even smaller. Quenil, who was commanding the battle against the black mice on the outside, listened to the report from the communicator and smiled. He shouted at Knight, who was firing 2 guns not far away. "That friend of yours is a fucking genius. He finished the work of 50 researchers alone. He synthesized more than 100 antibodies. Of course, don't you know whose friend he is?" Both of them felt much more at ease. An hour ago, Pride was clawed and sent to the intensive care unit. Originally, he was worried about whether he had the corresponding antibodies, but now, there were more than 100 antibodies. Walking out of the analysis room, Sillin returned to the ward, and the medical staff treated his wounds again. "Have a good sleep. You'll recover faster that way." "Yes, I'll sleep." Sillin smiled, but the medical staff did not notice the meaningful look in Sillin's eyes. The medics had just left when Sillin's communicator rang. It was something Quenil had specially prepared for Sillin on the space plane when he was injured. After the call connected, Knight's face appeared on the screen. "Yo, your complexion looks good. You don't look like a heavily injured person. He wasn't seriously injured in the first place. He just looked scary," Sillin said. It was still very noisy on Knight's side. The sound of gunfire was incessant. "Hee, Sillin, I'm telling you, that big black mouse has been eliminated. You definitely won't be able to imagine how he was eliminated." Knight's face was wrinkled with joy. After hearing that the rat poison in Pride's body had been removed, Knight's heart was very relaxed right now. Otherwise, he wouldn't have taken this opportunity to share the embarrassing news of the battlefield with Sillin. He had wanted to call Pride's communicator as well, but that kid had fallen asleep after injecting himself with the medicine. "Oh, tell me." Sillin also wanted to know how useless that big black mouse was. "I don't know what went wrong with that big guy. It didn't even look at the road and just charged around. In the end, it crashed into a 200 square meter liquid nitrogen warehouse in the base. Huh." Sillin could imagine the situation at the time without Knight's explanation. The cold lethality caused by a 200 square meter liquid nitrogen warehouse was absolutely shocking. Coupled with the big black mouse's rampaging speed, the power of the cold explosion was not something the big black mouse could withstand in its current state. If it had been the big black mouse with the white ball in its body before, the liquid nitrogen would not have caused much harm to it. It was injured one moment, but it would recover in the next. This further proved that the white ball was special. Sillin rubbed the green pattern on his finger. No one could tell what he was thinking. The big black mouse was suffering from the cold damage caused by the liquid nitrogen warehouse, and then it was attacked by the operation team's firepower. One could imagine its ending. Knight described the situation vividly. After all, almost everyone on the battlefield was cleaning up the last loose ends, so there wasn't much to do. I even took the opportunity to snatch some souvenirs, the big black mouse's claws and front teeth. I didn't get them if I was slow. And I was very smug. You could be smug all you want. Right, don't hang up yet. Let me show you the beautiful nurse, Sillin said, after looking at the monitor next to him. The monitor was showing the scene outside the door. A beautiful nurse with a graceful appearance was standing at the door with a medicine tray and pressing the doorbell. When Sillin answered the call just now, he had set the door to anti-disturbance mode, so he had to press the doorbell to let the person inside open it if he wanted to come in. Sillin placed the communicator at the corner of the bedside table. It looked like he had cut off the connection, but in reality, it was just that he could not hear or see the other side, but the person on the other side could hear and see the scene on this side. He also covered it with a book as a cover, so it would not be discovered. Knight looked at the image of the beautiful nurse coming in with the medicine tray on the communicator, and his smile was especially sinister and wretched. Her figure was really good. With such a beautiful nurse taking care of him, that guy Sillin was in luck. The nurse smiled warmly and said softly, "It's time to change the bandages." "Thank you." The nurse simply pursed her lips and smiled at Sillin's gaze that was lingering on her voluptuous chest. She skillfully replaced the infusion bag with a new one before reaching out a fair and smooth finger to poke Sillin's forehead. Little pervert. Sillin was not embarrassed at all. He giggled and said, "That's because I'm facing a beautiful woman." After the beautiful nurse had left, Sillin turned on the communicator. "How is it? Not bad, right?" "Stunner, appraisal complete," Knight said with a wink. "Why don't you mutilate yourself a bit and enjoy the service of a beautiful woman? TSK, go enjoy it yourself. I'm not talking to you anymore. I'm going to clean up the battlefield. After I'm done with the last few black mice, I'll tell you guys about today's great showdown when we get back. I heard that you thoroughly despised those arrogant researchers today, kid. Well done. Forget it. Hurry up and clean up the mess and get yourself a few more rat claws. We can sell them for a high price when we get back to Seven Lights." "Makes sense. I'm going to grab a big bag first." After ending the communication, Sillin's smile faded away. His eyes were cold as he stared at the infusion bag he had just changed. A killer could not hide the cold stench of blood, even if they had changed their skin. However, he did not need to do it himself this time. Someone would naturally investigate this. Chapter 45. Since the battle was nearing its end, the remaining medical personnel in the space station ships had been sent to the planet. The research base's protective shield had finally been opened as well, so a few nurses were assigned to every space plane to take care of the wounded and sick. A nurse on patrol opened the door to Sillin's ward and prepared to record the patient's body examination data. The data displayed on the instrument was normal, but when she touched Sillin's wrist, she discovered that it was ice cold. Looking at the temperature displayed on the instrument, the nurse touched Sillin's wrist and forehead. It was still ice cold, and even his pulse was almost undetectable. How could this be? The nurse panicked and hurriedly pressed the emergency alarm bell beside her. The battlefield had ended, and Hoenil was directing the post-battle cleanup, rescuing the wounded in the caves and other parts of the base. The waste treatment plant had also sent a message that the cleanup was complete. It was only now that Hoenil could be considered to have relaxed a little. But that was all. He still had a series of things to take care of after the mission was over. Compensation for the dead and wounded, mission reports, and post-battle analysis were all things that he had to handle personally. Hoenil breathed deeply. This ordeal was finally over. Thank goodness those little devils were fine. As it turned out, Hoenil had relaxed too early. Just as he finished exhaling, Hoenil's communicator rang. Knight, who was dragging a bag full of rat claws and teeth back, saw Hoenil yelling into the phone from afar, "A bunch of trash. I'm coming over right now." After ending the call, Hoenil said something to a captain beside him and had Gerard come over to take charge of the follow-up matters. Then, he ran toward the spaceplane. Did something happen? Knight walked over and asked the captain. The captain did not think too much about it and said, "I think something happened to a patient on the spaceplane." Patient? There were not many people who could make Hoenil rush over in such a hurry without even caring about the battlefield matters. However, comrades like Gerard and a few other captains who were close to Hoenil were all on the battlefield. As for the patient on the spaceplane, Knight put down the bag and took out his communicator to make a call. It didn't take long before Pride's two nostrils appeared on the communicator. He said in an extremely sleepy and impatient tone, "What's all this noise about? I'm still sleeping. The doctor told me to rest more. If you delay my recovery," without waiting for Pride to finish, Knight cut off the call and dialed Sillin's number, but no one picked up even after a long time. Knight no longer cared about the bag of spoils of war and ran towards the spaceplane. Everything had been fine just now. What had happened? Hard ward. Although he was lying in the intensive care unit, Hard's swollen face and eyes showed that he was recovering well. Hard was talking to Serd, and Serd was telling him what had happened. As Serd spoke, the two of them heard a commotion outside. It sounded like they were heading towards the emergency room. I wonder who it will be this time. Serd sighed. Not long after, a nurse came in and checked the infusion bag. She then took a sample from the bag and put it into the instrument in her hand for testing. Seeing that the nurse was clearly relieved, Serd asked curiously, "What's wrong?" The nurse replied with a reassuring smile, "I'm fine. I can also ask the doctor directly." "Sigh, you're really fine here, but something happened to someone in the ward downstairs. We need to recheck every patient's medication." "The ward below? Who is it?" Serd asked casually. "I think it's someone called Silin." When Juanil arrived at the emergency room entrance, Serd was waiting there with Hard in his wheelchair. "Why did you come out? You need rest the most when your injury reappears." Hard could not salute like Serd when he saw Juanil. He raised his hand to salute, but was stopped by Juanil. He said, "I don't feel at ease lying there." Behind Juanil, a person wearing a medic uniform ran over to report the situation. The data of the monitors inside the ward had been erased. The two monitors outside the ward had also been tampered with, and the instruments inside the ward had all been hacked and tampered with. That was why they did not send out any alarm when the patient's body was in danger. Most importantly, they couldn't find any suspicious people right now. Juanil looked at the records on the electronic notebook and frowned deeper and deeper. Negligence. A medic came over from the drug testing room and said to Juanil, "There is a highly toxic substance inside the infusion bag. According to the dosage, it can kill within half an hour, but the patient injected with this substance does not feel any discomfort at all. They will only feel more and more sleepy. Then they will sleep until they die." The medic did not dare to say the last sentence, but everyone knew what it meant. Knight, who had rushed up to the ward downstairs when he did not see Silin, just happened to hear this. He was so angry that he pulled out his gun and pointed it at the medic's head. "Are you people eating shit? Don't you know which bag is poisonous and which is not? Didn't you do any tests?" To a warrior, they had no regrets if they died on the battlefield, but their souls would not rest in peace if they died for no reason or value. "Knight, calm down." Juanil motioned for the medics to pull Knight away, but failed to grab the gun in his hand. Knight broke free from their hands and put away his gun. He took the electronic notebook Juanil handed him and looked at the situation recorded on it. The monitors were tampered with and could not capture any suspicious people. Infusion bag. Wait a minute. I know who changed the infusion bag. Knight turned on his communicator and pulled up the communication record. "It's this woman." "Nurse?" Juanil turned on his communicator, dialed a number, and sent the video over. "Investigate this woman." Not long after he disconnected, Juanil's communicator rang again. Juanil looked at the number. It was a special communicator from Seven Lights. Although the main mission this time was over, the follow-up work was still being handled. Normally speaking, the people from Seven Lights would not ask about it at this time. After all, it might involve military influence. Juanil suddenly felt nervous when he thought of someone. He gritted his teeth and accepted the call. The image flashed, and M.O. Hang's unusually kind smiling face appeared on the screen. A little nail. As expected, cold sweat poured down Juanil's back like a waterfall. He had never been this nervous, even when he was facing that many black mice. Elder Mo, hello." Juanil's body tensed up as he saluted. Seeing Juanil's reaction, M.O. Hung said, "What's wrong? You're sweating all over. Why are you so nervous when you see me? Am I scarier than those mutated black mice?" M.O. Hung had a better understanding of the mission here. "It's more than scarier. It's much, much scarier." Juanil thought in his mind, but he really did not know how to answer. But before he could, M.O. Hung spoke. Something happened to Silin. How could M.O. Hung not guess something from Juanil's reaction? But when M.O. Hung said this, even Juanil on the other side of the communicator could feel the low pressure around Sir M.O. Sir M.O. was about to flip out. Chapter 46. Speaking of which, Mohang's face turned from sunny to gloomy the moment he returned from his business trip and found the leave slip Silin had left in the workshop. It caused everyone in the research division to keep quiet out of fear. Everyone knew that Sir Mo was in a bad mood, very bad at that. Because he knew certain things about the military operation, Mo Hung refrained from contacting him. It was only when he heard that the operation had come to an end and that Silin had analyzed and synthesized over 100 antibodies by himself that Mo Hang's mood improved a little. To quote Vice Headmaster in Ting's words, the old fox's tail had risen a little higher. But Mo Hung didn't expect that Sir Mo's cloudy mood would turn into a storm the moment he heard that Silin was in trouble. Mo Hang's expression turned even darker as he listened to Huan Neil's explanation. You're saying that my disciple made such a great contribution despite his injuries, but in the end, he was stabbed in the back. Huan Neil was silent. With his understanding of Mo Hung, it was best not to speak at this time. What's the situation now? Mo Hang's voice turned deep and heavy. It was so heavy that it was almost unbearable. After resuscitation, the doctor said that he has stabilized a little. I'm still worried. I'll rush over with some people right now. Huan Neil was contacting Mo Hung from a lounge next to the emergency room. While Huan Neil was sweating profusely as he dealt with Mo Hung, a medic knocked on the door and came in. Huan Neil had told him before to inform him the moment there was any progress from the emergency room. Seeing that Huan Neil was contacting him, the medic passed him the tablet. After reading the contents of the tablet, Huan Neil immediately felt a little more confident. Elder Mo, I just received news that Silin is out of danger. Seeing Mo Hang's obviously distrustful gaze, Huan Neil took the communicator into the emergency room and showed Mo Hung the vital data on the device. Then, he looked at Silin's complexion. It was only after a long while that Mo Hung finally believed him a little. However, he still requested that Silin be sent back to Seven Lights as soon as possible. Otherwise, Mo Hung wouldn't be at ease. I'm telling you, this old man won't bat an eyelid, even if everyone in the base is fed to the rats. Their value added together is far less than my disciples. Why should others pay with their lives when they themselves are incapable of causing a major incident? F asterisk king pay with their lives. Why do they need someone else to wipe their ass for them? His son, General Mo Ching, was a true disciple of the old man. Back then, Huan Neil and Gerard had experienced General Mo's ruffian temperament firsthand. Once his ruffian temperament was activated, it would be hard for anyone to stop him from doing what he wanted to do. Not only that, the opinions he made were absolutely the opposite of subtlety. For a person like Mo Hung, when he was in a good mood, he would put on the appearance of an amiable senior academic, but when he got angry, he would have to pray for the best. That was the principle of a bully's temper. The world they face is big, but the world in their hearts is not necessarily big. So, when they want to protect someone, don't stop them. Huan Neil knew this very well. That was why he could only remain silent in the face of Mo Hang's outburst of extreme remarks. He would listen to them one moment and forget them the next. Otherwise, it would affect Sir Mo's amiable image when it got out. It was a good thing that he had asked all the medical personnel to leave when he came in. Otherwise, there's no point in talking about it. After giving Huan Neil a few more instructions, Mo Hung finally disconnected reluctantly. However, Huan Neil had to report to Mo Hung about Silin's situation every hour, or Mo Hung would personally rush over with his men. There was no way Huan Neil would dare trouble Sir Mo. After disconnecting, Mo Hang's expression didn't look much better. Ever since he decided to accept Silin as his direct disciple, he had investigated the Duance family. He knew about the dirty tricks and dirty dealings within the family. The Duance family's influence in the 10 trade sectors could be considered great, but it was completely useless to Mo Hung. Mo Hung looked at a person's ability, not their background or the benefits brought by their identity. He even hoped that Silin could leave the Duance family. It would be best if he didn't have any background at all, so that he wouldn't be caught in those dirty fights. However, now that something like this had happened, Mo Hung wouldn't just stand by and watch his disciple suffer. Someone had to pay the price. Although Mo Hung was in the academic field, in fact, the old man also had a heart of iron blood. Just look at General Mo Ching. To be able to teach a person like General Mo, how could the old man be a soft-hearted person? Mo Hung adjusted the signal transmission code on his communicator and dialed a number. Some people had stretched their hands too far. They had gotten used to running amok in the 10 trade sectors, so they didn't know how big the universe was. Quenil, Knight, and the others began to track down the culprit. It didn't take long before they heard that the woman had committed suicide by injecting cyanide into the medicine warehouse. Moreover, she didn't avoid the warehouse's surveillance cameras and injected a large amount of cyanide right in front of them. She had no way to live after failing her mission and exposing herself. She couldn't understand why Sillin was still alive even at the moment of her death. It had been so long since the injection, but he was still alive. How did this woman sneak into the medical ship? And who was covering for her? The interrogations and checks on medical personnel were also relatively strict. She definitely had accomplices, and more than one at that. It could be a soldier, it could be a researcher, it could be a medical personnel. Quenil also knew the complexity of the situation. When he recalled the promise he made to Mo Hung immediately decided to have the ship send the wounded back to Seven Lights first. Sillin, Pride, and the others would assign special personnel to watch over them. Nothing could go wrong, or else the epaulets on his shoulders would have to be removed. While everyone was busy, Sillin's mind was very clear, even though he was asleep. He knew what was happening around him, knew Mo Hang's concern for him, and knew that night Hard Sird had been standing guard outside the door all this time. It would be a lie to say that he wasn't touched. Jinya had told Sillin when he was very young that humans were social animals. The number of people who had brushed shoulders or swept their gazes across the galaxy was more than 100 billion, but the number of people who truly treated you well could be counted on one hand. This was a kind of wealth that could not be obtained no matter how much money or how long one spent. Even a loner would have a longing hidden in the depths of their heart. This show was developing according to Sillin's expectations. He predicted that those people would have a backup plan, and the moment he saw the woman holding the medicine tray on the monitor, he knew that the backup plan had come. That was why he had left his communicator on and left a trail for Knight to trace. Even if he couldn't, he could still force the killer to his death. This kind of killer who failed his mission and exposed himself was dead for sure. However, this incident also allowed Sillin to feel the warmth he hadn't felt for a long time. It was the comfort he felt again after Jinya and Hina left one after another. When he was lying on the sickbed, there was at least someone standing guard on the other side of the door. For someone his age, he had experienced too much. Chapter 47. On the airship, Sillin, Pride, and Hard were arranged to stay in the same sick room. Sird and Knight were also in the same sick room. Although Knight wasn't injured, Quenil still arranged for him to go back first. Knight had no objections to this, and he felt a bit more at ease guarding the sick room himself in case another assassination attempt occurred. Since the matter had come to an end, Sillin recovered very quickly. Right now, the 5 of them were chatting in the room. 3 were lying down, 2 were sitting, and 3 were lying down. Sird was peeling fruits, and Knight was narrating the news he had just heard. I heard that the big black mouse had doubled its chromosomes after mutation, and produced a batch of little black mice asexually. The form is just like the queen and drones of bees. But I don't know the specifics, so people from other research bases went over to study it together. You know, if the results of this research were to come out, it would at least be published in an academic electronic journal with more than 70 contribution points in the League of Stars. Then they would become famous. Don't the people in the research base have any psychological trauma at all? Sird asked. Even now, whenever he talked about mice, he would recall the scene where he brushed past those black mice and felt an uncontrollable chill. That's what those people like. For example, if you were shot in the middle of an operation and managed to survive, would you be afraid of being robbed? Would you pick up a gun and participate in an operation next time? Of course I would participate in an operation. What's there to be afraid of with a gun? Isn't it normal to get shot? They are the same. Isn't it normal for them to research strange things? Sigh. Don't interrupt me. I'll continue. Knight cleared his throat and continued. I heard that those black mice produced a certain enzyme in their mutated bodies that allows them to continuously breathe without oxygen for a period of time. This also explains why they could stay in the deep underground cavern for such a long time. Knight was a person who always had an "I'm impatient" look on his face when facing others, but he had a different attitude and was a lot more talkative towards those he acknowledged. Seeing Knight's "I'm an expert" look, Pride glanced sideways and snorted, "What a shame. Oh ho, you have a problem with us, young master. Why don't you take a look at yourself? It's understandable that Scylla and Hard were injured, but what about you? Young master, useless burden?" When he saw Pride glaring at him indignantly, Knight threw a grape at him. "Don't tell me that you can't tell that the people in your group are special agents. It's precisely because I can tell that they are special agents that I don't want me next to them. That's why you deserve to be scratched by the black mice. Was that something you could handle alone? Do you think you're a star-level hunter or a heavenly edict warrior? Use your brain more, or else you'll never catch up to your brother, Ji Feihong. If I can't become a heavenly edict warrior, do you think you can? At least I became one before you did," Knight said disdainfully. If it wasn't for Ji Feihong asking him to take care of him, would he even care about this idiot? When Serd saw that Pride was about to charge over and fight to the death, Serd immediately went up to mediate. Scylla was amused as he watched from the side. If Serd didn't step forward to mediate, Pride would probably get beaten up by Knight again. Similar incidents had already happened a few times. However, the Heavenly Edict warriors and star-ranked hunters that Knight mentioned caught Scylla's attention. There were countless hunters in the League of Stars, and those who stood at the top were awarded the title of Star, which was what Knight referred to as star-ranked hunters. Currently, in the hunter world of the League of Stars, there were a total of 6 people who held the title of Star. The leaders of the 4 great hunter regiments were all star-ranked hunters, and there were also 2 elusive loners. These 6 people were collectively known as the 6 Stars of Hunter. In the army, the Heavenly Edict warriors held the highest honor among warriors and were awarded the title of Heavenly Edict. However, they were too mysterious, and many things were classified as top secret by the army. To the public, they only existed in legends. Even the descendants of generals like Knight and Pride were not clear about them. They only knew that there were 4 of them. The 4 Heavenly Edict generals and the 6 Stars of Hunter were the lifelong goals of warriors and hunters in this era. Only after this mission did we realize the difference between students and the regular army. We still need to work hard. Hard sighed as he lay on his sick bed. Hearing Hard's words, Knight and Pride looked at Scylla at the same time without saying a word. "Hey, what kind of reward do you think the school will give us after we return?" Serd said expectantly. "Reward?" Knight rubbed his chin. "It's either credits or money. However, we will record a military merit in our files. It may not be a lot, but it's at least an honor. It will be more useful if we mix into the army in the future." "That's good enough. Military merit is enough." Hard grinned. When they arrived at Planet 7 Lights, the warship stopped at the space station and was transported by a space plane. They landed at the Training Division's special port. Scylla and Hard were pushed out in wheelchairs. Originally, Pride was supposed to be pushed as well, but he did not sit on it for the sake of his pride. A lot of people were already gathered at the Training Division's port, and some of Seven Light's higher-ups were present as well. After all, this operation was due to the accident at Seven Light's research base. The students of the Training Division were all present, and so were Lung and C.I. Jinsheng. However, Lung was winking at Scylla and pointing toward a certain direction with his chin. There was a very familiar long flying car parked there. After Scylla was pushed out of the space plane, a person walked down from the flying car. When Knight saw that person, he abandoned Scylla and retreated without any sense of loyalty. From the looks of it, he was trying to hide as far away as possible. When Scylla saw the newcomer, the corner of his lips twitched. "Why are you here?" Emohung looked at Scylla seriously from head to toe with a stern face. After confirming that he had recovered well, he raised his hand and pinched. At the Training Division's port, the students and school higher-ups who came to greet and comfort the wounded, and the people who came down from the space planes added up to several thousand people. Under the gazes of these several thousand people, Scylla was pinched and reprimanded by Emohung. Emohung's strong and vigorous voice could be heard in the huge port. There were a lot of seniors among the students who came here, and they had only seen M.O. Hang's amiable appearance before. When had they ever seen Vice Headmaster M.O. like this? Every single one of them fell silent. Just looking at Silen's face, pinched by M.O. Hung, was enough to make their faces hurt. However, the school higher-ups were surprised. Those who knew M.O. Hung well knew that he would only pinch someone's face if it was someone he cared a lot about. Moreover, M.O. Hung might look like he was reprimanding Silen, but he was actually telling everyone else that this kid was under his protection, and they would have to go through this old man first if they wanted to touch him. 10 trade sectors, inside a manor on a planet at Sector D that was not far away from the bustling city. Aflon was watering leisurely with a watering can, and behind him, Officer Sappho was reporting the situation. Those families have suffered quite a bit from this incident. The military's seizure of supplies, the government's sudden investigation, the termination of business partnerships, and even the famous academics who were invited as guests have changed their minds. Aflon did not react much to the report. After he was done watering, he put down the watering can and wiped his hands with a towel Sappho passed him. Then he said, "Triple his bounty this time." "Yes." Then, the person responsible for contacting Seven Lights followed the original plan. "All right, I'll get to it right away." Chapter 48. Careful, watch your legs. Hey, be gentle. At Seven Lights Technology Development Zone's Research Division Hospital, M.O. Hung was directing people to transfer Silen from the wheelchair to the hospital bed. Silen had said that he could move on his own, but M.O. Hung did not listen to him at all. On one hand, he wore a look of disdain, as if Silen was a troublesome person, and on the other, his hands were constantly directing the people carrying Silen to move, as if he was afraid that Silen would bump into something. Silen wanted to cry, but had no tears. In reality, he could kill 10 black mice with his bare hands right now without suffering a single injury. But who told him to pretend to be sick? Pretending to be sick was a very painful thing. He brought this upon himself. Although the medical equipment showed that Silen was completely able to leave the hospital, M.O. Hung still forced Silen to continue recuperating for another 10 days, and no one was allowed to visit him during these 10 days. In reality, this was probably his punishment for Silen's sudden leave to participate in the training division's dangerous mission. Every day, Silen could only communicate with other people through the microcomputer. Seven Lights had an internal communication platform, and Silen's friend list only had 5 people: Knight, Lung, C.I. Jincheng, Hard, and Surd. Although there were only 5 of them, the chat box was flashing nonstop every day. Today, when Silen woke up in the morning and turned on the microcomputer, several messages popped up. They were all talking about the same thing, the rat extermination mission that the 5 of them had participated in. Now that the matter over at the biochemistry base had been resolved, there was no longer a need to hide it any longer. Moreover, even if every student in the training division kept it a secret, some students who were not part of the training division could always inquire about it if they wanted to. Since the matter over at the base had been exposed, Silen and the other 5 students who participated in the mission had also been exposed. There were even people who had created a strength ranking for them. Silen opened the Seven Lights forum according to the forum address Knight left behind. As expected, the first few hot threads were related to them, and there were even pictures of the black mice at the top. There were a lot of replies below, some positive, some negative. Of course, there were also people who came purely to see the mice. As for the ranking of the 5, from 1st to 5th, they were Knight, Pride, Surd, Hard, and Silen. As for why the ranking was like this, there was a reason. Why were Hud and Silen at the end of the line? When they got off the space plane that day, only the 2 of them were sitting. Hard was discharged the next day, but Celine had to wait a few more days. That was why he was the last one in line. Pride should be thankful that he insisted on not sitting in a wheelchair that day. Otherwise, he would have died of depression if he had to queue behind Surd. However, the more Silen read, the more ridiculous the content became. Where did it start to stray from? This was due to the person on the 1626 comment, buy-in. As soon as this person replied, the comments below began to go astray until they had nothing to do with the content of the post. This was probably what Knight and the rest wanted Silen to see. This is what the old man said. Actually, I'm more optimistic about the 5th one. As a result, The people below began to reply, and, judging from the time, the speed at which they replied was extremely fast. In less than a minute, more than 5 pages were filled. Surprise appearance of Beauty Saw. Beauty Saw, did you see the vow of true love I wrote to you 57 days, 12 hours, 38 minutes, and 3 seconds ago? Is this the legendary Beauty Saw? Could it be that Beauty Saw is interested in the 5th brat? What? Beauty Saw is interested in the 5th brat. Beauty Saw, have you already given your heart to the 5th brat? Breaking news, Beauty Saw has a crush on a first-year junior. Which bastard is the 5th? Drag him out and strip him. Sillin was speechless. He really admired their ability to twist words. He had witnessed how they could turn a grape into a durian, and each of them was more confident than the other. Sillin was speechless at the replies when the chat window started to flash again. Lung and Knight's avatars kept flashing. What now? He clicked it open and saw that both of them had sent him a large picture. On the picture was a girl wearing very fresh, light-colored casual attire. Her hair was tied into a ponytail, and she was wearing a sun hat. Her expression could not be seen clearly, and she was holding a bouquet of flowers in her hands. The main point of this picture was that its background was the hospital Sillin was staying in. Sillin, look at the main page of Seven Lights Forum. C.I. Jincheng sent over a message. When he returned to the main page of the forum, he saw that all the posts marked in red were incomparably eye-catching. They were all posts about that Beauty Saw, and there were countless comments denouncing Sillin, Beauty Saw's rumored boyfriend. There was also a pinned post titled, "Live stream of Beauty Saw visiting her rumored boyfriend." The more Sillin read, the more confused he became. He didn't even know who Beauty Saw was. So what the hell was this rumored boyfriend? The little speaker below the chat window kept ringing, and Sillin immediately clicked on the simultaneous call button. "Hello, Sillin. Have you seen Beauty Saw yet? Sillin, you're actually raising wildflowers, no, delicate flowers, behind our backs. There's an adultery going on. We demand the truth." While the two big mouths, Lung and Knight, were quarreling, the door to Sillin's ward opened with a beep. The medical robot walked in, and behind it was the Beauty Saw that Sillin saw in the picture. "I do want Sillin." The newcomer revealed a cheerful smile and greeted him generously. "Oh, it's Beauty Saw." The voices on the other side came to an abrupt halt because Sillin had turned off the microcomputer directly and looked at the newcomer. At the same time, Lung, who was at the trade zone, and Knight, who was at the training division, were hopping mad. Sillin actually dared to turn off the microcomputer. Could it be that he was going to do something he loved? The duo's thoughts had already begun to diverge. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Gallo Teresa, 5th year from the Research Division's Design Institute. She wasn't seductive, but carried a kind of refreshing beauty. Her every move gave off a feeling of magnanimity, and she was very approachable. This was everyone's first impression of Teresa. Sillin did not know who the others were referring to as Beauty Saw, but he knew the name Teresa. There were introductions of famous people in 7 Lights in the school's handbook, and Teresa was one of them. Teresa was a famous talented girl from the Research Division's Design Institute. She was a specially recruited student, and she was promoted straight to 5th year after 3 years of school. She studied under 7 Lights' famous Her Majesty and the wife of 7 Lights Institute's headmaster, Professor Lin, old Madam Lin. Professor Lin and M.O. Hung were old acquaintances, so it was no wonder that M.O. Hung allowed her to come in. "Is Professor Lin's project done?" Sillin asked. He had heard from Ling Long that Queen Lin was going on a business trip to Sector A for a project. From the looks of it, Teresa must have gone with Queen Lin. Teresa put the flower in her hand into a vase at the side. "Yeah, we just came back today as well. Professor M.O. praised you quite a bit at the dinner table today, and there aren't many people who can earn such high praise from him." Celine shrugged his shoulders and did not comment. Glancing at the microcomputer next to Sillin, Teresa smiled and said, "I've been gone for a long time. I saw your post while browsing the 7 Lights forum today, so I casually replied to it. I didn't expect the reaction to be so big, though. But senior sister, you don't look sorry at all." Teresa did not deny it either. After chatting casually for a while, Teresa stood up and bid farewell. It had been a while since she left Seven Lights for the project, and old Madame Lin was still waiting to deal with some trivial matters in Seven Lights. She could not stay here any longer. Thank you for coming to visit, senior sister. I'll treat you to a meal after I'm discharged. All right, I'll be waiting. Less than 5 minutes had passed since Teresa entered the hospital until she left, but the Seven Lights Forum was already in an uproar. Although there was only a picture of Teresa entering and leaving the hospital, just this alone was enough to make everyone's imagination roam. Then, someone used some unknown method to confirm that Teresa had indeed gone to Silen's ward. As a result, the entire Seven Lights Forum boiled over. However, Silen did not pay any attention to them. After Teresa had left, Silen flipped his hand open. It was a debit card. Teresa had patted Silen's shoulder before she left. It was also at that time that she had passed the card to Silen. No wonder he kept feeling that something was amiss. So the contact person was her. This was also why Silen had said that he would treat her to a meal after Teresa had left the hospital. Silen smiled meaningfully. Other than knowing that she was the contact person, Silen had also discovered a secret. As expected of a strong competitor for the Duance family successor, Aflon had hidden himself well. Chapter 49. Silen was finally allowed to leave the hospital by M.O. Hung, and he even wrote a touching and incisive 10,000-word self-criticism. But in the 10,000-word self-criticism, there wasn't a single sentence such as never again that M.O. Hung really wanted to read. In M.O. Hung's words, this was a machine without a core component. One word, trash. However, although the self-criticism was a little trash, M.O. Hung still framed it and hung it in his office. Every time Silen went over to submit a mission, M.O. Hung would point at the self-criticism on the wall and blah 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 blah. Of course, this was a story for another time. When Silen left the hospital and returned to the hostel, the door behind him was closed the moment he entered. There were 3 chairs in the living room, and 3 people were sitting on them. They were in the posture of a tripartite hearing. The trio, who were usually too busy to return to the hostel, were all present. C.I. Jincheng was playing with the control panel in his hand. If Silen were to run out right now, he would probably be attacked by some unknown substance. Knight was moving his wrists and pressing his fingers loudly. Lung was smiling wickedly at the side. Severe punishment for confessing or resistance to streaking. Choose one. Silen looked at the trio, calmly dragged over a chair, and sat down facing them. I choose C. You bastard. The trio rushed up and pressed Silen down, strangling him. Hurry up. What's your relationship with Beauty Sa? Beauty Sa supporters are already at our doorstep. Look, they even threw rotten eggs. Lung pointed a yellow spot at the window and complained. Bullshit. There's actually someone in Seven Lights who dares to bully you? That was obviously thrown out when you were trying to fry an egg. There's even oil on it. Don't think I don't know. Be gentler. My neck is going to break if you keep strangling me. I'll talk, all right? After finally freeing his neck and catching his breath, Silen explained the cause and effect. A long while later, Knight asked suspiciously, is it really because of Professor M.O. and Professor Lin that she knows about you? Ask her if you don't believe me. Lung looked thoughtful. So you're saying that you're the closest to the water, right? It's the right time, the right place, and the right people. If you still can't get it, you'll be too weak. Knight also came over mysteriously. What did you guys do in those 5 minutes? Chatting. What else? Still chatting. After trying hard to discern Silen's facial expressions, the 3 of them said in disappointment, what a talent. Speaking of which, when the students on the Seven Lights Forum dug out Silen's identity and background, there were indeed some who gave up. In terms of looks, Silen was certainly not bad. His temperament would definitely make people's eyes light up. In terms of status and background, he was a member of the Duance family, and his father, Aflon, was on the rise recently, and the position of heir was not far away. At that time, he would be the crown prince of the Duance family. Other than some forces in sectors A, B, and C, there really weren't many forces that could surpass the Duance family. In terms of talent and learning, he was Eldermo's student. How could he have become Eldermo's student if he didn't have some ability? In terms of strength, there was no need to even mention this guy. He had carried guns and killed rats before, and his individual combat strength was ranked top 5 in the training division. How could he compare? Therefore, more people were inclined towards watching the show and gossiping. The next day, Sillin took his hoverboard and prepared to go out. The trio, eating breakfast, looked at him at the same time. Today is the weekend. There's no class. I'm treating Teresa to a meal today. Sillin was fairly frank. Fuck, animal. The trio took out a bunch of tools the moment Sillin's front foot left the hoverboard. Reception is normal. Let's test the satellite surveillance. Let's see how that Sillin guy picks up a beauty this time. Sillin knew that the 3 scumbags in the hoverboard would not be idle, but he did not plan to avoid them. After buying a few things on the way, Sillin came to a forest outside the school zone and arrived at the agreed place with Teresa. Teresa was already waiting there. She was still dressed in simple and elegant attire, and she looked exceptionally harmonious when combined with the surrounding scenery. Sorry to keep you waiting. Sillin put away the hoverboard and took out the food he just bought. It's fine. I purposely came early. It did surprise a lot of people to come to the forest area for a picnic instead of a restaurant. Why did he say that it was a lot of people? Other than the 3 idiots in Sillin's hoverboard, there were even more people who were tracking Teresa. However, be it from the satellite or using binoculars from afar, the dense forest was their biggest obstacle. They could not see clearly even if they used a fluoroscope. Therefore, they could only see 2 people sitting there, enjoying their picnic and chatting happily while watching the flowing stream. There were already a lot of photos posted on the Seven Lights forum. Although they were separated by a large patch of leaves, one could still see the 2 people sitting by the stream. They could not help but let their imaginations run wild. Inside Sillin's hoverboard, Lung complained incessantly. Sillin is so cunning. He actually went to such a remote place. The image is blocked by the leaves. We really should install a bug on that guy. Of course, Lung was only saying it casually. They also knew that there was a limit to everything. Moreover, C.I. Jincheng was the one who threw the tracker into Sillin's bag in broad daylight, and Sillin did not say anything about it. This proved that he was not trying to hide his tracks at all. They must be talking about a beautiful life and a romantic future. Many people thought so, but in reality, the topic Sillin and Teresa were talking about had absolutely nothing to do with romance. Since this incident dealt a huge blow to the opponent, Mr. Duance Aflon has paid 3 times the reward. I believe that it will not be any less for the next 2 months. Teresa said, my mentor, Professor Mo, has taken action. Not only that, your 3 roommates have all taken action. The military, business, government, and academia have all given some pressure. I heard that the assassin organization has also been put on a wanted list, and they have been thinking of taking revenge on their sugar daddy recently. Sillin smiled when he heard this, and said nothing. Although the suppression from many sides will make those people restrain themselves a little, Mr. Aflon told me to tell you that some people from the Duance family might take this opportunity to make a move. This way, they can shift the blame onto those unlucky bastards, so you should be careful for the time being. However, I think that Mr. Aflon is worrying too much. With your abilities, there is absolutely no problem for you to deal with these people. You really think highly of me. Sillin turned his head to look at that little stream. Unlike the purely man-made streams of planet Brown Earth, this place had a beauty that leaned towards nature. There was even a crab under that rock. When he was young, he would often go to the stream that was slightly further away from the slums to play with Hina, but there was nothing else there other than rocks and water. Hina even said that there was no life in that stream, and that if she could one day see an overflowing stream with all kinds of little fishes, prawns, and crabs on TV, she would definitely be very happy. Sillin touched the pendant hanging in front of his chest inside his clothes. Do you see it? Hina, there are crabs here. This stream is alive, and we will see even more lively streams in the future. Who are you thinking of? Teresa asked. In that instant, just now, the gentleness in Sillin's eyes seemed to be able to drown a person in it. I'm thinking of crabs. Sillin stretched his back. Is there anything else? No. I'll tell you when I receive news in the future. As long as you remember the payment, you will absolutely not be left out of this. Let's end our meeting here. I see that you're getting impatient as well. Let's give each other a goodbye kiss before we leave. When she was done, Teresa leaned forward and leaned towards Cylin. On the screens of many Seven Lights students, they saw Beauty Saw and Cylin lean towards each other. The distance between them grew closer and closer, and then, fuck, the tree leaves blocked it. Lung pointed at the tree leaves that blocked the screen and said angrily, "I'll give anyone who cuts down that bastard tree 100 million. At the same time, in another room, Ling Long crushed the fifth microcomputer of the day. Everyone knew that the duo had kissed. Did they really kiss? It was true, but it was just a face. Teresa had only kissed Cylin's face, but due to the effect of the tree leaves, everyone took it for granted. Teresa's grasp of the angle was very good. She knew exactly which direction they would be monitored from. After cleaning up the things on the ground, Cylin displayed his hoverboard. Teresa pressed the key button, and a flying car flew up not far away. Its color turned from green to white. It was the camouflage color she used earlier. "Do you need a ride?" Teresa asked as she sat inside the car. "No thanks. It was a pleasure doing business with you. Remember the payment." It was a pleasure doing business with you. Both parties left in two different directions. However, Cylin flew along the stream for a while longer, and not many people paid attention to him anymore. Knight and the others also opened the forum and looked at the posts. The entire Seven Lights forum was filled with hot posts regarding Cylin and Teresa. There were pictures and the truth. The moment Cylin entered the room, Knight and Lung threw down their microcomputers and ran towards him. "Kid, hurry up and tell us the crucial part of today's... Fuck, crabs. Where did you get these crabs? They're so fresh." Knight and Lung did not care about the picnic kissing incident any longer. The duo rubbed their hands around a big bag of crabs. Ci Jin Chang. These two gluttons. That night, while everyone else in Seven Lights was spitting saliva around the forum, the four people in Cylin's room were happily eating crabs around the table. Chapter 50. The Shisha incident may have caused quite a stir, but it only lasted for a few days before it was completely overshadowed by another matter. The Sector Championship was about to begin. What was a Sector Championship? It was a Sector Championship that all the universities in Sector B and C and the top 10 universities in the 10 trade sectors would participate in. It included events such as mech combat, gun combat, wrestling, integrated warfare, and so on. It was a gathering of experts and geniuses from all over the world to show off their skills. It was also the most influential competition among the universities every year, and it had a special section on the electronic magazine Gathering of Stars that had over 70 contribution points in the League of Stars. Gathering of Stars was an electronic magazine that specialized in reporting all kinds of competitions. It was the electronic magazine with the highest contribution points in the competitive competition category, and it had a great influence on the entire League of Stars. The importance of this competition could be seen from its special section on Gathering of Stars. Moreover, this competition was closely related to each university's student source in the coming year. If a university did not have any outstanding performance in the Sector Championship, then who would be willing to enroll? Seven Lights was undoubtedly the beneficiary of this competition. In recent years, Seven Lights had been steadily occupying 5th place, and this was something every Sector B university was jealous of. Why was it that they were jealous of a mere 5th place? It was because the top 4 spots of the Sector Championship were all occupied by the 4 military academies of Sector C. After all, the people of Sector C were all people who had trained their skills through hard work. Therefore, the universities of Sector B would compete for 5th place every year, but most of the time it was occupied by Seven Lights. That was why Seven Lights had the honor and reputation it had today. This was also one of the reasons why so many big families and forces thought of ways to send their children to Seven Lights every year. Seven Lights was like a rich family, and entering this rich family was absolutely beneficial to one's future development. Seven Lights had no lack of descendants of rich families like Lung and Pride, but the ones who truly pushed Seven Lights to the peak were almost all the specially recruited students. Therefore, Seven Lights treated the specially recruited students quite handsomely. Old professors like Mo Hung preferred specially recruited students because they had flashes of ascending to the peak. Recently, the number of people in Seven Lights at the Trade Street and the Entertainment Sleepless City had decreased a lot. The training division and the school zone's training rooms were almost full every day, and some people stayed in their dorms all day long to warm up on the Sector Championships combat platform. The Sector Championships combat platform was only open a month before the Sector Championship, and it would shut down after the Sector Championship. The Sector Championship battle platform had training grounds for all kinds of competitions. Although it was only a virtual area, some training grounds would still be full, and those who wanted to train would have to queue up. In fact, apart from the final integrated battle, which was a real battle, the rest of the Sector Championships matches were all conducted on the Sector Championships battle platform. However, because the sensors would reflect the physical conditions of the contestants onto the platform, the virtual characters on the battle platform were actually not much different from the physical conditions of real people in reality. Therefore, physical training was also a must. There were no special criteria to qualify to participate in the Sector Championship. Students from the 1st to the 4th grade could participate, but those from the 5th, 6th, and 7th grade could not. In reality, they could only be considered as half students. For those who continued to pursue their studies, they were already considered as half professionals, and thus could not participate in the Sector Championship. For example, the military academies in Area C or the universities in the 10 trade zones only had 4 grades. For the sake of fairness, the students of Sector B who are pursuing their studies do not have the right to participate in this tournament. It could be said that Knight had been looking forward to this match for a long time. He was full of ambition, and his heart was set on knocking those people out of the military academy to appease his hatred for not being able to enter the military academy. For the past few days, Knight had almost never left his room. He had set up a special storage cabinet in his bedroom, and he would eat whenever he was hungry. After he was done eating, he would continue to fight on the Sector Championships platform. He even wished he could hug the sensors to sleep. Registering an account on the Sector Championships platform required a 7 Lights card as identification, and each student could only have one account. Therefore, the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade students already had accounts, and their accounts would only be erased after graduation. There were no classes scheduled during the Sector Championship, and even if there were classes, Sillin could choose not to attend them. His current credits were already enough for him to enter 3rd grade straight away, not to mention that he had Sir Mo Hang's support. The instructors in charge of the class turned a blind eye to Sillin's absence. He turned on his microcomputer, put on the sensors, opened the Sector Championships platform, and scanned his 7 Lights card to register his account. The account name Sillin entered was Shadow X, and the account name was displayed as usable. After various verifications, the registration was finally displayed as a success, and only a simple introduction was displayed in the Shadow XS information bar. ID, Shadow X gender, male genotype rank, B school, 7 Lights battle information, none other than the ID. The other information was automatically generated based on the 7 Lights card, and they were all real information. Since he had not participated in any competition yet, many of the display bars were blank. After the information was confirmed, a choice of appearance and physique popped up. He could choose to display it as it really was, or he could modify it himself. The initial appearance that popped up was very similar to a kind of housework robot that Mo Hung and the others had created. It looked very common, and there was nothing special about it. However, Mo Hung had always liked to add extra beautification and modification to robots, and Sillin was too lazy to do so many unnecessary things. It wouldn't affect his participation in the Sector Championship anyways. The reason why Sillin participated in the Sector Championship was originally just to see the geniuses from all over the world and to improve himself from the fights. He didn't think that it was necessary for him to fight for a place. After all, even if he did fight for first place, it would only belong to Sillin Dewance and not him. However, Sillin had still underestimated the importance people placed on face engineering. When Sillin finished registering and officially walked into the Sector Championships platform, the first thing he heard was, "Fuck." This guy is actually running naked on the Sector Championships platform. Therefore, the first day Sillin entered the Sector Championships platform, he appeared on the homepage of the Sector Championships forum. Sudden appearance of a naked man. Shadow X had already become known before he had even started a single match. There were even some Seven Lights students who accused Shadow X of losing the school's face and tarnishing its reputation. Sillin was very speechless. It wasn't like this robot was showing its dick, and it looked just like those anthropomorphic housework robots that usually ran around the streets. Since the system had set up such a generic robot option, then it must have been chosen by someone. Naked my ass. Moreover, whether or not it was tarnishing the school's reputation was earned through fighting, not words. Sillin paid no more attention to those bored people. He decided to find someone to spar with first and familiarize himself with platform combat. Coincidentally, there was also a person who had just finished registering and walked out of the newbie area at this time. The person was wearing camouflage clothing, and he told everyone directly that he was from Sector C's military academy. Sillin looked at his information. Fong, male, 3rd Military Academy, rank A genotype. Not bad, a good target to practice on. Sillin sent a 1v1 challenge request straight away. Fong seemed a little surprised. He was challenged the moment he came out, and it was by a rank B genotype non-military academy student no less. Why did he dare to challenge him, a military academy's rank A genotype? Generally speaking, there were many times when rank B genotype military academy students would tie or even win against non-military academy rank A genotype non-military academy students. It was no wonder that Fong was so surprised. Fong's first reaction was that this kid's brain had gone haywire, but it would be too embarrassing to refuse. After all, this was the first challenge request on the Sector Championships platform. Therefore, Fong pressed the accept button. Chapter 51. There were tens of thousands of students practicing their solo battles on the Sector Championships platform every second of the day. Therefore, as a newcomer, no one had applied to watch the match between Shadow X and Fong right now. Moreover, since they were newly registered accounts, the twos followed and followed sections were both blank, so no one could know about their match in time. Those who posted about this streaking incident on the forum's front page would not follow Shadow X. That was just a form of entertainment they happened to encounter after their intense training. Meanwhile, those who criticized Shadow X would not follow him either, because that would make them feel humiliated. This also caused them to miss a great opportunity. Both sides agreed to enter the individual battlefield after the match. After pressing start, Fong did not move. After all, the opponent was only a rank B genetic student from a non-military academy. If he made the first move, it would feel like he was bullying the weak. Sillin also knew what the opponent was thinking, so he made the first move. A white shadow flashed over. For normal people, it might be very fast, but for Fong, it was just average. Therefore, while Fong raised his hand to block the attack, he was also distracted to evaluate the opponent's posture. Not bad. While Fong was thinking, he realized that his arm was somehow shaken away a little when he was about to block the opponent. It was precisely this gap that allowed the opponent's hand to cleverly pass through the gap and attack him twice as fast as before. Bang! Fong took a few steps back from the attack. Sillin evaluated inwardly. As expected of a military academy. If it was anyone else, they would have been sent flying, but the one in front of him only took a few steps back. His physique was very strong, and his reaction was also very fast. Although he could not avoid this attack due to his distraction, the bones and muscles in Fong's chest were all in a highly defensive state the moment Sillin attacked, reducing the attack power of this attack. Moreover, even if Sillin took the opportunity to launch a combo attack while Fong was retreating, Fong believed that he was already prepared. After Fong stood still and looked at this guy who looked like a generic robot, he suddenly felt a little hot on his face. He was actually beaten back by a rank B genetic newbie who was not from a military academy. Moreover, seeing that the opponent did not come up but stood there quietly, as if waiting for him to recover, Fong felt a little angry. He had let his guard down. Before the opening of the Sector Championships platform, The instructors had told them not to look down on non-military academies. There were plenty of crouching tigers and hidden dragons there, and it all depended on whether or not you could encounter them. He didn't expect to meet such a person as soon as he registered. There was anger, but Fong's fighting spirit was even stronger in his heart. He got into a defensive stance and signaled his opponent to attack. Seeing that Fong was ready, and he wasn't distracted this time, Sillin also increased his strength. Sillin's moves seemed to be light, but when he was close to Sillin, he suddenly accelerated and changed his moves erratically. It was difficult for Fong to judge Sillin's intention in that instant. Besides, Sillin's moves were secretly powerful. One blow could make Fong retreat a few steps. The more times he was repelled, the more steps Fong retreated. When Fong was beaten back for the 5th time, he also felt that something was wrong. The other party seemed to have been testing him. To put it bluntly, they were playing. A surge of anger rushed up, and Fong didn't care so much anymore. Let's fight then. It's not my style to hide. This time, Fong didn't defend and took the initiative to attack. At the same time, in a certain dormitory in the 3rd Military Academy, 3 people exited from battle mode after ending their own battles. As expected, we can only find people from the military academies to fight. Those people in Sector B are too weak. One person complained, "You're still looking for people in Sector B? Leave those to the first years. We can only find our own kind." Like me, I've been picking people from the 1st and 4th military academies. The 1st Military Academy ranked 2nd in the Sector Championship last year. The 3rd Military Academy was still ranked 3rd, and the 4th Military Academy was the champion. As for the 2nd Military Academy, because they ranked last among the 4 military academies, they were laughed at by the other military academies last year. All right, that guy from the 1st years should have registered too, right? You mean that Fong Ferritin? The 3rd Military Academy's 1st-year Ferritin was ranked 5th in terms of individual combat strength. The students called him Fong. However, he seemed to have been sent on some mission by the instructors a few days ago. There was no news about Ferritin a few days before the opening of the Sector Championships platform. Do you know what his register name is? Look it up. Just search for Fong. You should be using this nickname. Yeah, there really is one. He just registered today, and the information shows that he's from our 3rd Military Academy. But he's currently in a match. The rest of the people in the dormitory swarmed over. Most of the military academies were dormitories with 4 to a dozen people. This dormitory alone had 8 people. The 8 of them gathered together and discussed. The opponent is actually from 7 Lights, and he's just a rank B genotype no less. With Ferritin's strength, why would he bully someone from 7 Lights? It's already been 16 minutes, and it's not over yet. Ferritin is probably going easy on him. He's a newbie after all. While they were talking, the screen showed that the match had ended. Ha, it's over. I told you that Ferritin kid, he lost? How is that possible? Fong's battle status was shockingly displayed as 1 loss, while Shadow X's was displayed as 1 win. After a moment of silence, someone spoke up. This Fong isn't that Fong, is he? They were silent. According to the information, it should be Ferritin, but the result of this match was too strange. Wait, let me ask. One of them opened the 3rd Military Academy's in-school chat software. Right now, in one of the 3rd Military Academy's dormitories. Ferritin sat there drenched in sweat. Both his arms were trembling, and he was panting heavily. The rest of the people in the dormitory were shocked by Ferritin's appearance, but when they saw Fong's battle situation on the screen, it was as if they had seen a ghost. Ferritin felt the throbbing pain in his muscles, and the sensors clearly transmitted the pain to him. Shadow X was practically using the entanglement formula earlier, pestering him and continuously increasing his strength until he finally forced his own fighting spirit to the point where it turned into killing intent. Ferritin held his head with his hands. The sweat on his forehead kept dripping down when he thought of that moment. Shadow X looked like a generic robot, but at that moment, he looked like a demon king. If this was a real battle, Ferritin was certain that he would be dead already. Completely and utterly dead, and his arms would be broken into pieces. After sorting out his thoughts, Ferritin took a deep breath and moved his slightly stiff arms a little. Ferritin, That's Shadow X. Very strong. The guy is very strong. Ferretin sighed. Then, he stood up and took his communicator to the balcony. After Ferretin walked out, the few people in the room exchanged glances with each other. There really weren't many people of the same age who could be evaluated as very strong by Ferretin. Therefore, they logged into the Sector Championship platform, searched for Shadow X, and added him as their followers. When the people in the upper grade dormitory saw that there was no response from the in-school chat loudspeaker, they were guessing the reason. Then, someone shouted, someone added him as their follower. The number of people following Shadow X was displayed as 5. When they clicked on it, all 5 of them were freshmen from the 3rd Military Academy. 5 minutes later, Fong focused on Shadow X. The in-school loudspeaker also played Ferretin's reply. Fong, it's me. Shadow X is very strong. Ferretin did not become depressed just because he lost his first battle on the Sector Championship platform. On the contrary, he was very excited right now and did not deliberately hide his loss to Shadow X. He had told the instructor about this just now, and the instructor had analyzed the reason for it. Moreover, it was very beneficial for Ferretin to find his own shortcomings and inadequacies. Every time he came into contact with a new fighting style, it was the best opportunity to improve himself. Shadow X's fighting style was undoubtedly a very good example. Ferretin's reply caused the upper grade dormitories to boil with excitement. Therefore, 1 to 10, 10 to 100, this was also the reason why the generic robot Shadow X had attracted the attention of tens of thousands of people on the first day. Moreover, the people who were paying attention to him were all the students of the 3rd Military Academy. Chapter 52. Silin had frequently received challenge requests from Military Academy students after the Fong's battle, but he only accepted one challenge every day because he didn't have that much time. Although the Sector Championship was a relatively important competition to many people, it was not even comparable to a tiny spare part to his mentor Mo Hung. Other than Mo Hung, there were also some people like C.I. Jinsheng and Lung who did not place much importance on the Sector Championship. C.I. Jinsheng had gone on a business trip to the communication base at a nearby asteroid, while Lung had gone to manage his business. Some of Planet 7 light supplies came from Andrira's family, and because the Sector Championship was approaching, the demand for certain items had begun to skyrocket. More than half of the necessities, such as microcomputers and sensors, were supplied by Andrira, and then 7 Lights would sell them to the students. Lung was probably collecting money even in his dreams right now. The Sector Championship was nothing but a money-making tool to him. During the first 3 days after he registered on the Sector Championship platform, every time Silin logged on, he would discover a huge pile of challenge requests in his inbox, and all of them were from the military academies. The 3rd Military Academy was the only one on the first day, but by the second day, the other 3 military academies had jumped out as well. Silin only picked a random person to fight, slept until the next day after the battle, and then went to the research division to complete Mo Hang's assignment. It was only during these 3 days that Silin fought on the Sector Championship platform, and on the 4th day, Silin was ordered by Mo Hung to stay at the research division to complete a large mechanical assembly. It would probably take a few days. In Mo Hang's words, "Isn't it just a warm-up before the match? Why are you messing around with those people? Hurry up and get down to business." This was one of the rare, tactful words from Sir Mo. If he was a little more direct, those hot-blooded students fighting passionately on the Sector Championship platform would probably bang their heads against a wall and die. Because once, Silin heard Mo Hung mutter, "No matter how hard I work, I'm still only number 5. Just like that, Silin temporarily left the Sector Championship platform and threw himself wholeheartedly into Mo Hang's great mechanical plan. In other words, it had only been 3 days since Silin logged onto the Sector Championships platform. He had challenged 1 person and accepted 2 challenges. In total, he had 3 matches, and his record was 3 wins and 0 losses. 3 wins and 0 losses. There was nothing special about him just by looking at his battle record. There were plenty of people with over 100 wins and 0 losses on the Sector Championship platform. But what was special was that there were 2 special characters among the 3 people Silin had fought. One was the first person he had challenged in the 3rd Military Academy who was ranked 5th in terms of individual combat strength, Faradin, ID Tusk. The other was the fellow from the 4th Military Academy with the ID Invincible Champion, whom Scylla had randomly drawn. He was a new student. It was precisely because of these two that the number of people from the 3rd and 4th Military Academies who challenged Scylla in the following period of time was exceptionally high. Of course, Scylla did not know about these recent events, at least. When he was assembling his machinery, he did not have the time to think about the sector championship. Scylla was not currently working in his own workshop, but in Mo Heng's large workshop. At this moment, Scylla was staring blankly at the piles of sorted parts all by himself. So many. And Mo Heng was sitting leisurely on a chair not too far away, his legs propped up on the table, and he picked up a cup of tea to taste. As punishment for you taking leave for no reason before, I'll leave these to you. There were originally 10 parts waiting to be assembled, but Master has specially picked the most complicated one. See how much Master loves you. And Mo Heng said in a hurried tone of kowtowing and thanking Master for his kindness. Take leave for no reason, my ass. The corner of Scylla's mouth twitched. Master, you really hurt me to death. Scylla emphasized the word hurt. Of course, who asked you to be my disciple? Ever since Scylla found out that being a research assistant in this circle was almost equivalent to being a disciple, and a true disciple at that, Scylla felt that his future was filled with parts. What are you still standing there for? Hurry up and get to work. Don't think I don't know that you ate 3 big bowls of rice, a pot of noodles, and a plate of roast chicken for breakfast. You have all the strength you need right now, kid. Also, as my supervisor, don't even think of slacking off. If the overall accuracy can't reach 96% of the theoretical value, then dismantle it and start over again. And Mo Heng patted the monitor next to him. The program had already been set up, and it was just waiting for Scylla to start calculating the overall accuracy. Scylla looked at Mo Heng helplessly. Thank you for your grace, Master. You're welcome. If the students outside saw Mo Heng's appearance, their jaws would definitely drop. At this moment, Mo Heng was completely devoid of his usual amiable smile and the steady temperament of a senior professor. Vice Headmaster and Ting described Mo Heng like this as a senior academic consultant. Scylla arrived in front of the piles of parts and gave them a cursory look. First, he had to assemble the parts that had already been categorized into components, and there was a certain order to the assembly of these components. He had to choose which pile to assemble first and which pile to assemble next, so that he could save more time during the assembly later on. With just a glance, Scylla could see the best assembly order for these piles of parts. After choosing a pile, he began to assemble them. Mo Heng nodded in satisfaction. His disciple was still better than Scylla. Not even the disciples of those old fellows had eyes as good as Scylla's. Every knuckle, every muscle, and every joint had just the right amount of strength and precise timing. There were no unnecessary movements, but it was as if they were looking at a perfect work of art that they couldn't take their eyes off of. The feeling it gave off was that a part could be assembled with the slightest movement of a finger. It was incomparably easy. In reality, there were multiple movements happening at the same time in that instant. It was just that it was difficult for a normal person's vision to capture them. Every time Mo Heng watched Scylla assemble, he would have the feeling that the golden point was right in front of him. It was a wonderful feeling. Scylla was Mo Heng's hope, his hope to make contact with that legendary light. The monitor next to Mo Heng showed that his overall accuracy had reached 96% of the theoretical value. This was a very difficult feat to maintain, and even the great teachers of 7 lights might not necessarily be able to maintain such high overall accuracy for a long period of time. This was the difference between constitution and concentration. For a mechanical engineer, constitution was also an important factor. Every time Scylla assembled, he felt that he should be able to assemble faster and have higher overall accuracy. But no matter how hard he tried, his overall accuracy could only stay at 96%. It was like a transparent barrier. He could see the other side, but he couldn't jump over it. So forget it. I can't force this kind of bottleneck either. If I accidentally shake my hand and my overall accuracy drops to 99, 95%, then according to Mo Hang's standards, the entire part will have to be dismantled and reassembled. Dismantled and reassembled? Suddenly, Sillin felt a blurry light flash through the darkness. Dismantle and reassemble, dismantle and reassemble. Mo Hang was watching with great interest at first. He was sighing at his disciples' powerful assembly talent and feeling pleased with himself on the inside. But in the next moment, he saw Sillin suddenly stop what he was doing and stand there motionlessly, as if he was stunned. Chapter 53. Mo Hang did not disturb Sillin. Sillin must have thought of something. Sometimes, as long as a fleeting idea was grasped again, it would be very beneficial to personal progress. Such an opportunity could only be encountered. Of course, he hoped that Sillin was really inspired and not hungry again. If that was the case, Mo Hang would not be able to resist throwing the cup at him. Sillin stayed there for a few minutes. Then he put down the parts he was still holding and put aside the parts that were almost assembled. He took out the combination tool knife and began to dismantle the parts one by one. Until now, Sillin had only assembled and had not really dismantled any machinery. Therefore, when he was thinking, he always felt that something was missing. The so-called mastery was to have a more comprehensive and thorough understanding. Forward and backward, assembly and disassembly, this should all be more thoroughly understood and practiced. During the process of dismantling, Sillin could think from a different angle and analyze the machinery. It turned out that this was what he had been missing all along. Every time Sillin swept his eyes across an assembled machine, the only thing he would think about was how it was assembled. He never thought about how he should dismantle and dismantle the machine, which direction he should start from, which part he should start from, and what order he should follow. Reverse deduction, reverse speculation, just like anti-tracking during hunting, should be on the same level as forward thinking, but it was often ignored. Divergent thinking and convergent thinking played an equally important role. Sillin's dismantling was not slow either. Almost all one could see was Sillin holding the tool knife and making a casual cut. The parts that were originally assembled as a solid whole were all separated. Every angle of force applied meant whether the dismantled parts were intact or deformed. The parts that Sillin dismantled fully explained the ability of the disassembler. On the parts, as long as the tool knife touched them, there would more or less be traces left. They might not be visible to the naked eye, but they definitely existed. Even the slightest change in a part would affect its precision. Therefore, during the process of dismantling, Sillin tried his best to reduce the number of times he used the knife. Therefore, there was a flash of the knife, and several pieces were dismantled. Mo Hang looked at Sillin's movements and nodded to himself. Sure enough, he was inspired and not hungry. After Sillin disassembled the parts that were almost fully assembled, he sat on the ground and tossed the parts up, caught them, tossed them up again, caught them again, tossed them up again. Then he put the parts aside and lay on the ground, staring at the ceiling. In his mind, the parts were scattered all over the place, then assembled one by one. After assembling, they separated, disassembled, assembled, disassembled, assembled. After thinking for a moment, Sillin crawled to his feet and began to assemble. Unlike before, Sillin would toss a few parts into the air when he was assembling, and when the parts fell to the assembly point, Sillin's hand would flash, and the parts would be firmly attached to it. At first glance, it looked as if the parts were being tossed into the air and then falling back down. If one looked closely, they would see that the parts were falling in a certain order. At the same time, during the assembly, Sillin made improvements in 3 areas. This was a shortcut discovered during the reverse process. A string of data appeared on the screen. The overall accuracy is 99. 96% of the theoretical value. The overall accuracy is 99. 96% of the theoretical value. The overall accuracy is 99. 97% of the theoretical value. The overall accuracy is 99. 97% of the theoretical value. The overall accuracy is 99. 97% of the theoretical value. The overall accuracy is 99. 97% of the theoretical value. The overall accuracy is 99. 97% of the theoretical value. Mo Hung was so excited that his face turned red. Genius. Sillin was definitely a genius. How long had it been since Sillin started formal education in mechanical assembly? The overall accuracy of the assembly was almost on par with a veteran like Mo Hung, who had been immersed in this field for many years. He was also one of the best in the entire Galactic Alliance. In such a short period of time, the overall accuracy had improved from 95% to 97%. Then, how long would it take to reach 98%? Sillin was completely immersed in that world. He was assembling piles and piles of sorted parts into parts, and then assembling these parts into a complete body. Mo Hung had been watching Sillin's assembly all this time and didn't look at the calculation screen again. Sillin's series of assembly could absolutely be used as an excellent teaching example. However, he didn't know how much other people could learn from it. It was a test of a person's eyesight and active thinking. Throughout the day, Sillin did not stop. Mo Hung sat there and watched Sillin assemble. Neither of them ate lunch, nor did they have the intention to stop. When Sillin finished assembling the last part, he checked it and pressed the switch. The machine continued to change forms. The movements were smooth, and there were no other noises or suspicious sounds. "There's no need to check. It's completely qualified," Mo Hung said. He could not hide the excitement in his voice. Just as he was about to get up and take a good look, he realized, ouch, it's numb. Mo Hung rubbed his legs. He had been in the same position for too long. Only now did he realize that his legs were numb. "Sillin, hurry up and help me up. Calm down a little. Sit down first." Sillin walked over and put two chairs side by side. He slowly placed Mo Hung's legs on them and began to massage them. "Sigh, I'm so old and useless." Mo Hung sighed. "I saw that you were quite imposing when you were scolding people yesterday. Those mentors couldn't even lift their heads." Yesterday, Sillin had coincidentally seen the scene of Mo Hung scolding those mentors. That was called imposing and forceful. It felt like he was exuding the aura of a king. Those mentors who were usually arrogant in front of the students all had their heads almost buried in their crotches. Mo Hung raised his head. "That's called temperament. It's innate temperament. Even if you still have the aura of a king, you can't forget to eat and sleep when you're working, can you? I heard that you often stay in the workshop, working for several hours at a time. This is called professionalism," Mo Hung said with a face full of righteousness. Yes, professionalism. "Hey, you brat." Mo Hung reached out and pinched Sillin's face. "What's with that look of disdain? How would I dare? But even machinery needs maintenance, not to mention people. You better be careful. As the pillar of the research division, you have to last. Otherwise, I'll be in trouble if no one looks after me. TSK, you little brat." Mo Hung scolded jokingly. After pinching Sillin's face hard, he waved his hand. "All right, it's not numb anymore. I'll take a look at the machine first." Mo Hung walked around the machine that Sillin had already assembled, carefully examining the finished product in front of him. "Master, I want to take a vacation. I'm exhausted today." "Permission granted. Vacation. Mo Hung's eyes were still shining as he walked around the machine, reaching out to check it from time to time. "Master, I want a raise." After coming to the research division, other than the fixed salary of an assistant, Sillin received extra income for every completed mission. This extra income was naturally paid by Mo Hung. "All right, a raise. Mo Hung agreed readily. 3 times the salary. "No problem, 3 times. And hurry up and go eat." Seeing that Mo Hung was still not ready to leave, Sillin ordered food and had the robot send it over. Of course, Mo Hung paid for it. After eating with Mo Hung in the break room of the workshop and discussing his thoughts on assembly, Mo Hung told Sillin to just sleep there. In Mo Hung's heart, the only people who stayed in Mo Hung's break room were his son and grandson. Sillin was the third, which showed how important Sillin was to Mo Hung. Mo Hung's workshop and office both had special break rooms, and because of Mo Hung's high position, the break room was fully equipped, so Sillin did not refuse. He took over Mo Heng's break room, ate dinner, took a nice bath, and slept comfortably for 2 days. Silin slept soundly, but little did he know that the sector championship platform was in an uproar. Chapter 54. After he was done sleeping, Silin got up and opened his communicator. There were more than 30 missed calls, and all of them were from the same person. Looking at the time, they were all called during Silin's usual rest hours. But this time, Silin had slept for 2 whole days, and his communicator was turned off. Looking at the number and the many replies as soon as you see this messages, Silin was puzzled. What the hell was this guy up to this time? However, Silin still dialed the number at the first opportunity. The call was swiftly connected without waiting, and Knight's haggard and aggrieved face appeared on the interface. Silin nearly spat out a mouthful of water he was drinking. Just how wronged must he be to make Knight, a man who usually acted like he was number one in the world, say something like this? What now? I'm being bullied. Bullshit. Who would dare bully you? Who in the entire 7 Lights could bully you? Get to the point. After Knight's explanation, Silin finally understood why this guy had called more than 30 times. Knight ran into his old friend Stantine of the 2nd Military Academy when he was doing warm-up training on the Sector Championships platform. However, Stantine and another student of the 2nd Military Academy were defeated by the Visby brothers of the 4th Military Academy during warm-up training, and it stirred up Knight's fighting spirit. However, Knight really couldn't find anyone he liked to team up with in 7 Lights because the Visby brothers only participated in the less popular double matches and not the popular single matches. The first person Knight thought of was Silin, but Silin's communicator was turned off, and he didn't reply to his messages either. He tried looking for CI, Jinsheng, and Lung, but neither of them were free. Certain hard, their abilities were still lacking. Pride? No way. Knight felt that if Pride went, he might not be able to stop himself from fighting all 3 of them at once. It was better to go with Silin, and so the communicator was turned off after the first call. The second call was turned off, and the third call was still turned off. Knight had endured from yesterday until today, and his face was haggard. He wanted to go to the research division several times, but if he did, Mo Heng would probably leave both of them there. If that was the case, then he really wouldn't have any chance at all. The Sector Championship was about to officially begin, and the registration for some of the smaller competitions ahead of it was the first to open. There were 2 days, yesterday and today, so it was no wonder that Knight was in such a hurry. Silin was amused by Knight's aggrieved look. All right, I just had a few days off. I'll go with you to meet the twins. Knight's eyes lit up when he heard Silin's words. The haggard look on his face disappeared as if he had been injected with chicken blood. Brother, you'd better come back soon. The registration ends tonight. I'm going to send the dual invitation right now. Beep. Silin was speechless as he stared at the disconnected communicator. Just how thirsty was this guy? After stretching, washing up, and tidying up, Silin walked out of Mo Heng's workshop. After sleeping for 2 days, he was hungry. Looking for food was his top priority. As he walked to the research division's cafeteria, a student who did not look well greeted Silin weakly. What's wrong, Singh? You don't look too good, Silin said. Singh was about the same age as Silin. He was a specially recruited first-year student, but he basically did not go to class. He spent most of his time in the research division working on projects. Don't mention it. Poor bowel movement. I bring shit to work. Singh had always felt that working in the research division was just like going to work. He had to clock in, work on projects, and get paid. He was like an office worker. Singh, this is a cafeteria. Can't you be a little more refined? Someone beside him spat out his orange juice and glared at Singh. Sorry, I have to be considerate to someone with periodic constipation. Singh made an apologetic gesture and left the cafeteria. Silin smiled and shook his head. This guy was famous for his periodic constipation. After looking for food, Silin returned to his workshop to pack up and get ready to return to the dormitory. As he was packing, Ling Long came over. After entering, Ling Long asked in a small voice, "There's no one else here, right?" "No, the surveillance wasn't turned on either." "What are you trying to do? Are you trying to take over a man?" After eating and sleeping, Silin was in a much better mood and joked around more. Ling Long curled her lips. After closing the door, She crossed her arms and looked at Scylla with a sneaky smile. How would I dare to take over Shadow X? Scylla was surprised. Ling Long's words were very certain. There was not even a hint of speculation in them. How did she know? The information protection measures on the platform were done by him personally. Ling Long looked straight at Scylla. Whether you swim in the water or fly in the sky, whether you are ugly or beautiful, I can always recognize you at first glance. Scylla smiled when he heard this. Levine's Colors, Chapter 7, The Butterfly and the Dragonfly. You read Levine's books too? Ling Long's eyes shone, as if she had finally found a friend after traveling thousands of mountains and rivers. Very few people read Levine's fantasy fairy tales with a more artistic style. I didn't expect you to read them too, and remember them so clearly. Scylla didn't say anything. Chapter 7 of Levine's Colors was about a butterfly and a dragonfly. There was a very large tree by the stream. Its thick branches stretched across the stream. A very disgusting caterpillar was lying there eating leaves. The branch was very close to the water, and after eating its fill, it climbed up the leaf and looked at the water below on a whim. Through the reflection of the water, it saw an ugly and ferocious-looking insect below the water, and that insect also saw it. For a period of time, the caterpillar ran over every day, and every day the insect under the water would wait for it at the same place below the water. Days passed, and the caterpillar was about to turn into a cocoon. That day, it ran to the same place and glanced at the insect under the water, then climbed to a place on the tree where its companions were turning into cocoons. The day after the caterpillar left, the insect under the water climbed out and attached itself to a plant that was exposed above the water. Many of its kind also climbed out along the water plants, and their bodies began to change. When the caterpillar broke out of the cocoon and flew out as a butterfly, it immediately returned to the original place, but there was no sign of the insect under the water. It was very dejected and flew with its companions to a flower field not far from where it was. There were colorful flowers everywhere and all sorts of butterflies, dragonflies, bees, and so on. It was very lively. The butterfly flew and flew, and when it passed by a patch of irises, its gaze fell on a purple iris. There was a dragonfly there, flapping its wings, and its thin wings reflected a metallic glow under the sunlight. At the end of The Butterfly and the Dragonfly, Levine wrote a paragraph as usual. One of the lines was, "Whether you swim in the water or fly in the sky, whether you are ugly or beautiful, I will always be able to recognize you at first glance." Do you believe Levine's words? Exquisite asked. I don't know, Scylla answered. But Hannah believed that she liked this fairy tale very much, and that was why Scylla remembered it. Exquisite glanced at Scylla. You don't believe it. Jumping onto the table at the side, Exquisite shook her legs like a child. There are many unreasonable things in fairy tales, but I agree with Levine's words. Turning around, Exquisite looked at Scylla seriously. I knew it was you the moment I saw Shadow X. Scylla's back was sweating. Was this a confession? Fortunately, Exquisite did not dwell on this. She took out the microcomputer from her bag, turned it on, logged into the Sector Championship platform, and pulled up the Sector Championship forum. Look, Shadow X, you're famous. Chapter 55. Scylla rarely fought on the Sector Championships platform to begin with, fighting only once a day. This was already enough to make a lot of people want to throw a tantrum. And this time, Shadow X disappeared for 3 days in a row without accepting a single challenge. Some people could not help but come out to criticize him. On the Sector Championship forums, a lot of people had posted their challenge requests right away, openly challenging Shadow X. Most of these people were from the military academies, and most of them were A-rank genotypes. The challengers were all A-rank geniuses from military academies. A military academy's A-rank genotype actually dared to openly challenge 8B-rank genotype student of a Sector B academy. Moreover, all 4 military academies were like this, completely unafraid of being laughed at by others. Everyone could not help but wonder just what kind of divine being Shadow X was, that he could actually force those military academy students who usually look down on the other sectors into such a state. Shadow X had only appeared for 3 days, and these 3 days were not long at all. However, that generic robot appearance of his had already become a major characteristic, and at the same time, it also caused a lot of people to feel helpless. There was information about Shadow X on the forums. It was a generic robot image and a simple and monotonous list of information. Male, 7 lights. Rank B genotype, 3 wins and 0 losses. That was all. It was so simple that it was mysterious. After Shadow X's first battle against Tusk, the number of people following him exceeded 10,000. After his third battle, his name became famous throughout the entire Sector Championship platform, and the number of people challenging him had reached 5 digits. Most of them were military academy students of Sector C. The number of people following him had reached 6 digits and was growing rapidly towards 7 digits. This was an unprecedented situation. Since Shadow X had not logged onto the Sector Championships platform for 3 days, someone jumped out to accuse Shadow X of acting like a big shot. Putting on airs? If you have the guts, come and play with me. The people of 7 Lights immediately responded. The people who used to accuse Shadow X of corrupting the school's reputation had also changed their stance. Right now, Shadow X was 7 Lights' treasure. There were also those who said that Shadow X was deliberately avoiding the battle, but this voice did not last long before it was scolded down by the other armies, especially those few people in the military academies whose words carried a lot of weight. They believed that Shadow X had something to do and had not logged into the Sector Championships platform for the time being. There were people from 7 Lights who had specifically made a list of 7 Lights' first-year students who were stronger than the rest and whose genotype was at rank B, and Silen's name was among them. It was just that he had been eliminated in the first round of screening. A person who had just recovered from a serious illness could challenge someone from a military academy right after being discharged from the hospital? No one would believe it. Moreover, some of the trainees from the training division said that Silen's marksmanship was not bad, but in terms of individual combat ability, they did not know. After all, he was ranked last among the 5 trainees who participated in the mission. However, after many rounds of screening, they could not find a single person who could possibly be Shadow X. One of the threads speculated that perhaps Shadow X was not a freshman at all. There was no information about his year in his information at all, so he could not be identified as a freshman just because it was his first time registering on the Sector Championships platform. It should be known that there were plenty of amazing people who had missed out on the Sector Championship due to certain missions during their freshman years. As soon as this post was posted, many people responded to it. In short, there were all kinds of opinions. Therefore, when Silen looked at the Sector Championship forum page that Exquisite had opened, he was also stunned. He had not expected that just 3 days of contact with the Sector Championship platform would result in such an effect. That's why I said, Shadow X, you're famous now. Exquisite looked at Silen. What do you plan to do? Let's talk about it later. Anyway, I have a few days off. I'll log in today and check out the situation. I don't know how many challenge requests you've received, but the Sector Championship is about to officially begin. Are you going to participate in the minor tournaments before this? Minor tournaments referred to those single or 2-man tournaments, while major tournaments referred to those that were conducted by teams. Regardless of whether it was a minor tournament or a major tournament, it had nothing to do with the popularity of the tournament. For example, the single combat tournament was more popular and the audience would always be packed to the brim. The 2-man tournaments, on the other hand, were a little colder and the chances of stars appearing were not as high as the single combat tournament. You want to know? Silen stood up and packed his backpack. Let's wait until tomorrow. Exquisite wrinkled her nose in dissatisfaction and snorted softly. Stingy. She put away her microcomputer and even made a face at Silen before she left. After Exquisite left Silen's workshop and walked out of the Institute of Mechanical Engineering, she saw someone standing in the hallway not too far away. She was still dressed in the same refreshing attire as before. It was not flirtatious, but it gave off a very dazzling feeling. Teresa did not turn around to look at Exquisite. She was still looking at the distant scenery with a smile on her lips. When Exquisite saw Teresa, there was none of the playfulness she had in Silen's workshop just now. Her deep amber eyes were filled with coldness. so coldness that Teresa could clearly feel her killing intent. You know, there's someone else in Scylla's heart. Even so, it won't be you, Teresa. Exquisite had always called Teresa by her name. Teresa did not mind either. She only smiled lightly as she felt the breeze blowing over. Teresa, I don't care what kind of deal you have with Scylla. If anything happens to Scylla, I won't let your galwa get away with it. With just you, or your background. Teresa played with her hair that was blown up by the wind. It seemed that she did not take Exquisite's words to heart at all. Exquisite looked at Teresa and suddenly smiled mockingly. Teresa, you always think you're very smart. She then left without looking back. On the same day, when Scylla returned to the dormitory, Knight was still the only one there. Seeing that Scylla had returned, Knight no longer cared about the matters on the Sector Championship platform. He urged Scylla to log into the Sector Championship platform and sign up. When Scylla logged in, Knight ran back to his bedroom and brought his microcomputer over. Registration required 2 people to enter their information at the same time. For convenience's sake, Knight directly brought his own equipment over. However, when Knight saw the screen that popped up on Scylla's microcomputer, his mouth dropped wide open. On the screen in front of Scylla, an unusually familiar-looking generic robot was swaying back and forth. The name displayed was Shadow X. Scylla what? F*CKU. Knight rushed over and strangled Scylla's neck. I didn't expect you to be the mysterious generic Shadow X that spread all over the Sector Championship platform, the one who single-handedly provoked the war between 4 military academies. How dare you hide it from us for so long? Sai, it's not like you asked me. Hurry up and sign up. Registration is more important. That's right. I'll let you go today. Next time, I'll let you know the consequences of lying to us. You're a great man. Please forgive me. I'll treat you to crabs next time. Don't give me that, kid. I'm telling you, fuck. I want to eat fresh, live, and unexperimented crabs. As expected of a glutton. Scylla only took a glance at the unread numbers in his message box and inbox before he stopped looking at them. That number, it was a lot, although he had logged into the Sector Championship platform. He was in stealth mode. He could neither fight nor train. Of course, it was still possible to sign up. Knight's ID was simply Knight. Knight was quite famous on the Sector Championship platform, and many people in the military academies knew him. Moreover, Knight was ranked first among this batch of 7 Light's new students in terms of individual combat strength. Of course, he received a lot of attention. However, when Knight's and Shadow X's names appeared in the participant list of the Double Combat Tournament, the entire Sector Championship platform boiled over. Just how big of a wave would this duo cause? Chapter 56. The Sector Championship was very open, fair, and free. Everyone who signed up would be recorded and made public, and anyone who logged onto the Sector Championships platform will be able to look it up. This way, if they saw someone they wanted to challenge, they could also sign up and participate. In the past, the single combat tournament was the most popular of all small-scale competitions. It was very easy to stir up the students' blood. Everyone hoped that they could become a domineering figure who could single-handedly defeat tens of thousands of opponents. With such glory and standing in the limelight, who would be willing to share it with another person? But this term was different. When the duo of Knight and Shadow X appeared on the participant list, the entire Sector Championship platform situation began to change. The single and double combat competitions were held at almost the same time. Students would usually only participate in one of them. At the same time, it was also a more comprehensive assessment of each school's combat strength. Due to the sudden discovery of the duo's name on the list of participants, many students who had already signed up for the single combat competition also signed up for the double combat competition. As a result, the number of people signing up for the double combat competition exceeded the number of people signing up for the single combat competition. Fortunately, it was a virtual platform. It could provide multiple match points to start at the same time, so it would not cause a situation where too many people could not participate. There was no upper limit to the number of participants in the small-scale competition. This was also a major feature of the Sector Championships platform. Inside the 3rd Military Academy's gravity training room, Faradin was fighting against someone. The blurry shadows of fists and the banging sounds of fists and kicks clashing against each other rang out incessantly. It was obvious that Ferretin was slightly inferior to the opponent, and he was having a bit of a hard time dealing with the fists that were coming his way. To be able to maintain such a high speed in such a gravitational field, it had to be said that the two of them were quite outstanding. Bang! Faladin took a few steps back, swung his arms that blocked the kick, and said with some annoyance, "I missed another move." "It's fine. You're already very outstanding. No one in the first years can block so many of my moves." After fighting for such a long time, Ferretin's opponent actually didn't sweat much, and his slightly hurried breathing soon calmed down. Ferretin looked at the other party and said for the umpteenth time, "Boss Boar, I really want to see your duel with Shadow X. It must be very exciting." Standing not too far away, Boar relaxed his muscles and shook his head. "Shadow X is too mysterious. Many of the people I know have sent him war invitations, but none of them have responded. Who knows what kind of god he is? But I suggest you meet Nate when the time comes. 7 Lights Night? He seems to be quite famous. I heard from my dorm that he's also a freshman." Ever since he lost to Shadow X, Ferretin hadn't paid much attention to anyone else. He usually only learned about them from others. Knight could have come to the military academy, but somehow he ended up at Sector B. However, his strength cannot be underestimated. "Do you know Nate's full name?" Ferretin shook his head. "Knight's full name is Fiegler Knight." "Thunderstorm Fiegler?" Ferretin was immediately interested. "That kid hasn't used Thunderstorm Punch since he entered the Sector Championships platform." Faladin rubbed his fists and feet. "He will definitely meet him when the time comes. He should be participating in the single combat tournament, right?" "It should be DDD." The emergency pager on the wall of the training room rang. Communicators were not allowed in the gravity training field, so both of them had their communicators turned off. If there was an emergency, they would use the special pager on the wall to transfer the call. Boar walked to the side, removed the gravity field, and connected the pager. "What happened?" "Boss Boar, there's big news on the Sector Championship platform. Knight and Shadow X have teamed up and signed up for the double combat tournament." Ferretin, who was putting on his jacket, pricked his ears and lost control of his strength, tearing his jacket into 2 pieces. Ferretin didn't care about his jacket either, and simply tossed the 2 pieces to the side before running to Boar's side like a wisp of smoke. His ears were pricked up, afraid that he would miss a single word. When the other was done, Ferretin was so excited that he couldn't wait to run back and sign up for the double combat tournament immediately. After the communication was cut off, Boar was silent for a moment before asking Ferretin, "Is Shadow X really that strong?" Ferretin's expression immediately turned incredibly serious. "He's very strong. I don't know how strong he really is, because I feel that he didn't use his full strength at all when he fought me. Also, I felt like I was being led by the nose from the beginning to the end. That last strike, just one strike alone, could have killed me at my peak." After hearing Ferretin's words, Boar laughed out loud. "That's good. Ferretin, let's go meet Shadow X and Thunderstorm Knight." "Boss Boar, you're going to? Didn't the instructor say that you're going to fight Kamos for the championship of the single combat tournament this year?" Although Ferretin was very tempted by Boar's suggestion, since Boar was the runner-up of last year's single combat tournament, and his strength was there for all to see, and he had also gotten familiar with Boar's sparring sessions over the past half a year. Forming a pair to fight in the double combat tournament was definitely possible, but the instructor's words were in front of him, and he couldn't go back on his word. The instructor also said, "Isn't the purpose of a combat platform to fight to your heart's content? What's the point of having so many false reputations?" Ferretin pressed his fingers together and muttered inwardly, "The instructor's bullsh asterisk T of false reputations are meant for us inside the 3rd Military Academy, but the false reputations outside the 3rd Military Academy are very important to them because those are related to their welfare. Otherwise, they'd punish us to run around the field naked." Not long after the duo of Knight and Shadow X appeared on the double combat tournament name list, the 3rd Military Academy's Boar and Ferretin duo brought everyone's attention to the double combat tournament once more. Half an hour later, at almost the same time, the second Military Academy's Ryan and Bond duo, as well as the first Military Academy's Kamos and Feng Haichao duo, set off the third climax of this term's double combat tournament. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that this time's double combat tournament was filled with glittering stars. Last term's double combat tournament champions, the Visby brothers, Thunderstorm Knight, and the much-anticipated Shadow X. Last term's second place in the single combat tournament, Boar and the second Military Academy's Rising Seed Ferretin. Last term's fourth place, Ryan and Bond, who was rumored to be stronger than Ryan, but had missed last year's tournament due to a mission. Last term's single combat tournament champion Kamos and Feng Haichao, who was rumored to also have missed last year's tournament due to a mission but was no weaker than Kamos. Looking at it this way, other than the fourth Military Academies, Valente, who shared second place with Boar in last year's single combat tournament, 3 of the top 4 contestants of last year's single combat tournament had appeared on the double combat tournament's name list. The Sector Championships platform went completely crazy. Since the top few of Sector C's 4 military academies were participating in the double combat tournament, the other academies naturally couldn't be left behind. Although from a strategic point of view, the best way would be to avoid a tournament where experts gathered and participate in another tournament. From a personal perspective, this time's double combat tournament held too much significance. They hadn't seen such a scene for many years, or at least in all the years that they knew of. There had never been a double combat tournament that could attract the top geniuses from all over the world. But this time was different. If they missed it, who knew how many years they would have to wait to encounter such a situation again? If they missed it, they would regret it. Since they didn't want to regret it, of course they had to sign up. Because of the matter of signing up for the double combat tournament, the faces of every academy's higher-ups darkened. They couldn't stop the students from signing up even if they wanted to. Spittle flew everywhere, and using both carrot and stick, these little fellows still eagerly signed up. It truly infuriated the higher-ups of the academies. The night of the registration deadline was a crazy night. Whether it was the electronic publication responsible for reporting or the students who didn't sign up due to their limited strength, everyone was so excited that they couldn't sleep well for the entire night. On the other side, Sillin, who was about to sleep and rest, and Knight, who was still fighting on the Sector Championship platform, were simultaneously pulled back to their senses by a fatal series of calls. Sillin pressed the accept button. "Where's Soul Sika? You could have just dialed our numbers. But why the hell are you dialing all 5 communicators installed in the dormitory at the same time? Are you calling the police?" "Sillin, Knight, just you wait for me without any sense of loyalty. I'll return to the dormitory immediately. Don't fall asleep. I'll drag you out even if you fall asleep." Lung roared loudly from the other side of the communicator. Chapter 57. Although Lung had never had the time to participate in the Sector Championship, he had always been paying attention to the happenings on the Sector Championship platform. Before this, he did not dare to confirm whether or not Shadow X was Sillin. But when Knight and Shadow X's team appeared on the registration list to participate in the double combat tournament, Lung knew that Shadow X must be that bastard Sillin. That was why he immediately dialed Sillin and Knight's communicator numbers at the same time. Just in case, he dialed the other 5 public communicators in the dormitory at the same time, treating it as an alarm. The moment Lung entered the dormitory, he saw Sillin and Knight sitting in the living room with their legs crossed, waiting for him with dark expressions. Judging from their expressions, if he did not give an explanation, he would probably have to sleep on the streets today. Before coming, Lung had already planned everything out. First, he had to apologize and calm the other party's anger first. Pastry from a newly opened pastry shop. There are meat and fruit fillings, kept in a fresh-keeping box, still crispy. Oh, and 2 cups of hot milk tea. Eating pastry and drinking milk tea, not bad. Lung handed Sillin and Knight a cup of milk tea each, and then took out a cup for himself. Based on Sillin's understanding of Lung, he definitely wouldn't have thought of buying milk tea. Even if he did, he would have bought alcohol instead. Adding other factors into the equation, there was an 80 to 90% chance that these 2 cups of milk tea had been gifted to Lung when he bought the shortbread. As for the 3rd cup, it was probably Lung who had used his characteristics to shamelessly ask for it. Seeing Sillin and Knight start eating the pastry and milk tea, Lung relaxed a little. Now he had to seize the initiative. Just as Knight was about to open his mouth while chewing on the pastry, Lung quickly put down his cup and reprimanded them righteously. You guys didn't discuss such an important matter with me. Do you know that you're not fighting for a competition, but money? Money. Sillin and Knight's mouth was still open, and he ignored the pastry crumbs that leaked out. Lung turned on his microcomputer, opened it to a certain page, enlarged the screen, and pointed at it to explain, there are also bets on the sector championship platform, officially organized. As he spoke, their communicators and the 5 public communicators in the dormitory rang at the same time. Looking at the name displayed on the communicator, Sillin facepalmed. Why do they all like to play this trick? After the call was connected, C.I. Jincheng's image appeared on the screen. He was still wearing his work clothes, and his workshop was behind him. As I thought, you guys are discussing a scheme, C.I. Jincheng said, as if he had expected this. Isn't it impossible for your base to communicate with the outside world? Also, isn't Seven Lights unable to casually communicate with the outside world? Lung asked. C.I. Jincheng said disdainfully, that's for normal people. It's useless against me. What were you talking about just now? Start over again. All right, since everyone's here, I'll tell you all about my grand plan. Lung cleared his throat and told them about the bet. After listening, Knight said hesitantly, but sometimes it's not something we can control. For example, if we meet those people from the military academies, they'll fight very hard because their battle results will affect the welfare of their instructors or instructors. If the welfare of the higher-ups is affected, those kids won't feel good either. They'll definitely fight with all their might. And if that's the case, we won't be able to control the time well. They haven't joined the League of Stars yet, right? Also, what are the welfare of their instructors and instructors? As far as I know, the military academy's instructors and instructors all have very high military ranks, and they definitely get a lot of money. Lung was puzzled. Knight shook his head and showed them with his fingers. Sector C's military academies are affiliated to the League of Stars' military. They're a little different from the military academies of the other sectors. Every student from Sector C is an absolute elite, not to mention those top students have been reserved by the garrisons since a long time ago. For example, 1st Military Academy's Feng Haichao, 2nd Military Academy's Bon, and the others had started carrying out missions a long time ago, so there was no need to worry about their future after graduation. However, some of the military academy's instructors and instructors are different. There's a word called banishment. They're all Galactic Army field officers, but some of them are in Sector B, C, some are transferred to the 10 trade sectors, and some are banished to the 13 backward sectors. As a soldier, are you willing to lead the troops to encircle and annihilate the galactic robbers and sector rebellions, or are you willing to lead the troops to open up new wastelands? At the same time, Sillin Helong had a look of realization on his face. So there were so many hidden meanings behind the welfare the military academy spoke of. But I believe that Sillin and Knight can take care of them. C.I. Jincheng said confidently. Duh, I believe that too. Otherwise, I wouldn't have abandoned my business over there and rushed over here overnight. Lung looked at Knight and Sillin expectantly. Knight rubbed his chin. Although he was frowning, the upturned corner of his lips could not hide his true thoughts. This is a very challenging matter. However, he liked this kind of extremely challenging matter. The trio looked at Sillin. Sillin slowly put down the cup in his hand. There is a certain degree of difficulty. Although he said so sharply, he still took out his card and passed it to Lung at the same time. Lung took it knowingly. How much are we betting? Everything. As long as I don't say anything, you can bet everything every time. Lung swiped Sillin's card reader across the card reader he carried with him. After looking at the number on it, his eyebrows rose. It looks like you're pretty confident. Knight tossed his card over as well. Bet it all on me too. Lung, I'll transfer the money to your card later. C.I. Jincheng also said from the other side. Tonight, while the other students were either too excited to sleep or training through the night, the 4 of them conspired to make money in the dormitory. What a scumbag it was. The next day, the first match list on the Sector Championships platform had been released. The match allocation was randomly assigned by the system, and Scylla and Knight's first match was against a pair of Prometheus Academy duo from Sector B. Their IDs were World Domination and Armies Breaker. Judging from their pre-match training results, they had a winning rate of more than 90%. Moreover, both of them were A-rank genotypes. It made sense. Which contestant in the tournament didn't have some skill? Moreover, both World Domination and Armies Breaker were among the top 50 in last year's single combat tournament. After a year of hard work, they definitely weren't weak in terms of strength, at least not in Sector B. Shadow X's first match was sure to be watched by a lot of people. Even those who were competing at the same time were prepared to end their matches as soon as possible to watch. It was only the first round of matches, but the number of people watching Shadow X and Knight's match had already reached the peak of the top 8. When Shadow X's iconic generic robot appeared on the field, the audience boiled with excitement. This was the first time Shadow X had appeared on the field since he disappeared 4 days ago. However, the audience was destined to be disappointed. In the first match, Shadow X crossed his arms and stood motionless at the side the moment he entered the field. Then, he watched the battle to the end. The entire match was won by Knight alone, and he didn't even use Thunderstorm Punch. He was still able to send the Prometheus duo flying in 5 minutes with ease. Of course, if he held back a little, the other party could have lasted another 5 minutes. Or, if Knight was a little more serious, he could have finished off the other party in 2 minutes. However, Lung's bet was 5 minutes. Shadow X didn't fight in the first match, and Knight won 1 versus 2. The second match was the same. The third, the fourth, gradually, some people couldn't sit still anymore. Damn system. Can't you arrange a stronger opponent for them? It's been 5 matches, and Shadow X hasn't fought even once. The few groups that were defeated by Knight wanted to cry. They were actually quite strong in the school. Finally, under everyone's expectant gazes, the duo of Shadow X and Knight welcomed a special opponent. The opponent was not from a military academy, and the reason why they were called special was because one of them played with guns and the other played with swords. The tournament rules didn't forbid weapons, but they had to apply for it. If both sides accepted it, then there was no problem. It was obvious that Knight and Scylla didn't refuse. In fact, they were quite looking forward to it. Guns and knives? Interesting. After 5 disappointing matches, the spectating students became excited once more. It was because Shadow X was definitely going to fight in this match. They had only heard of Shadow X's strength and had never seen it with their own eyes. After all, Shadow X had only fought 3 times, and no one had recorded it. No one could imagine just how strong he was. The time of Shadow X and Knight's match was different in different sectors, different planets, or even different places on the same planet. However, being able to witness Shadow X fight with their own eyes was worth staying up all night. Chapter 58. There was a reason why so many people were optimistic about this match. First of all, the duo that Shadow X and Knight were about to face were using weapons. One used dual blades, and the other used dual pistols. Second, and also the reason that many people were excited about, was that the duo using dual blades and pistols were both women, and they were 2 famous beauties of Sector B's Billy Academy, no less. Since they were 2 great beauties, the 2 men, Shadow X and Knight, would probably be more tactful towards them. Moreover, these 2 women were extremely lethal and would definitely force Shadow X to act. In fact, some people were even guessing if Shadow X and Knight would fall in this match. After all, there was news before the match that Shadow X and Knight had agreed to their opponents using weapons, but they were still fighting with their bare hands. This pedantic, gentlemanly demeanor would be their fatal weakness. This was the logic behind the saying that one would fail miserably in a simple task after crossing 1,000 flowers. The third and most important point was that this saber and spear duo, Lu Yewu and One Smile Kill, were ranked second only to the Visby brothers in the last double combat tournament. The last second place should be able to force Shadow X to act no matter what, right? It was unlikely that Knight alone would be able to hold on. There were even more people watching this match on the Sector Championships platform than the first match. The number of viewers for the matches that started at the same time as this match was pitifully low. Even as some of the duos were somewhat famous, they were completely overshadowed by the duo of Shadow X and Knight. Boss Boar, do you think Shadow X will act in this match? In front of the microcomputer, Faradin asked Boar. Boar thought for a moment and said, if Knight still does not use his Thunderstorm Punch, then Shadow X will act. This is because both opponents are armed, and One Smile Kill's marksmanship is pretty good. Although it is a little inconceivable to use a gun in a double combat tournament, in reality, she will not lower her attack power just because of this. The number of people who fell to One Smile Kill's gun in close combat during the pre-match training is no less than 100. One Smile Kill's gun can be used as a blade, and when it comes to close combat, One Smile Kill will not lose to Liu Yewu. Although Boar was a military academy student, he had never underestimated the people of Sector B. He had done his research on the veteran experts of Sector B. It wasn't just Faradin and Boar. Kamas, Feng Haichao, Ryan, Bon, and the others were also watching this match in front of their microcomputers. They truly wanted to know just how strong Shadow X was. If they were not strong enough, they would not participate in the double combat. They would directly fight for the championship of the single combat, because they had signed up for both projects. Under everyone's gaze, the duo of One Smile Kill and Liu Yewu walked into the arena. Their beautiful faces, tight-fitting midriff-bearing shorts, and beautiful waistlines were enough to attract everyone's attention, even though they were just virtual characters. However, the next moment, the two people who appeared behind them took the spotlight. It was still the same costume, still the same generic robot appearance, but it directly moved the attention of the audience in front of the microcomputer directly away from the two beauties. Shadow X, you'll make a move this time, right? As usual, Shadow X and Knight leisurely sauntered into the arena. The difference was that this time, it was Knight's turn to stand at the edge of the arena with his arms crossed, as if he was watching a show, while Shadow X walked step by step to the center of the arena. The people in front of the microcomputers were instantly excited. Oh, woo! Shadow X is going to make a move this time. He's really going to make a move this time. Boar, Faradin, and the others subconsciously straightened their bodies and stared at the generic robot on the microcomputer screen without missing a single glance. As Shadow X approached, One Smile Kill and Liu Yewu, who were standing side by side, separated. One retreated backward, and the other moved forward. One Smile Kill's slender fingers hooked the twin pistols that were originally holstered on both sides of her thighs into her hands. She nimbly twirled the pistols between her fingers. From his practice movement, it could be seen that One Smile Kill had been playing with guns for quite some time. But in Silen's eyes, this was nothing more than playing with guns. Meanwhile, Liu Yewu also took out her twin willow blades. In this era, there were very few people who could use such ancient weapons well. Those who used such weapons were usually the inheritors of some ancient branch. Liu Yewu looked at Shadow X, who was calmly walking over at a steady pace, and suddenly felt an inexplicable sense of oppression and urgency. That expressionless white face and that excessively calm movements gave people a feeling that they couldn't see through him or see through him. If that was the case, Liu Yewu leaped into the air and unfurled her blades. The wind from the blades howled as the silvery white blades closed in on Shadow X. But very strangely, Shadow X did not seem to be afraid at all. He still carried the kind of seemingly careless movement, but his figure flashed when Liu Yewu's twin blades came slashing over. Bam! Liu Yewu was sent flying backwards towards where One Smile Kill was standing. The wind from the blades was disrupted. In that instant, just when Liu Yewu was confident that she could cut the opponent, Shadow X's instantaneous high-speed movement and an inexplicable force caused the blades to deviate from their original positions. At the same time, Shadow X's palm had already passed through the gap between the twin blades and slashed over. Liu Yewu had no choice but to raise her blades to block this attack. Although Shadow X's speed in dodging the blades was very fast, the attack he launched wasn't fast at all. However, Liu Yewu could feel the force of this palm. As expected, this force sent her flying straight away. While flying backwards, Liu Yewu was still wondering why One Smile Kill didn't shoot. It wasn't that One Smile Kill didn't want to shoot at that moment, but she couldn't find a point to shoot. Shadow X was almost completely blocked by Lu Yewu. Before this, there were many people who used similar methods to avoid One Smile Kill's gun, but they were all blown up by One Smile Kill. In that instant, One Smile Kill wanted to laugh, but she still couldn't see Shadow X's figure after she shifted her angle. Shadow X was a few steps away from Lu Yewu. As Lu Yewu retreated, he moved along with her, using Lu Yewu as a shield at all times so that One Smile Kill couldn't find an absolute killing point. If One Smile Kill fired recklessly, there was a high chance that she would hurt Lu Yewu. Lu Yewu sensed Shadow X's thoughts and slashed at the ground with one blade. She used the momentum to twist her waist and slashed at Shadow X. Even if this slash couldn't hit Shadow X, it would still force him out of that angle and allow One Smile Kill to find a point to shoot. However, impossible. Lu Yewu's eyes widened in shock as she stared at the tip of her blade caught between the opponent's two fingers. At the same time the tip of her blade was caught by the opponent, a pulling force came from the tip. Lu Yewu tightened her grip on the blade to prevent the opponent from pulling it away. In the next moment, a huge tremor traveled through the blade to the space between her thumb and forefinger. Her entire wrist felt like it was about to break. Lu Yewu felt her wrists go numb, and her blades left her body. Crack! A sound came from the gun in One Smile Kill's hand. However, it wasn't the sound of a bullet being fired. What followed was silence. Two blades, one pointed at Lu Yewu's forehead, and the other at One Smile Kill's neck artery. Chapter 59. Fast Too Fast. Only a short 5 seconds had passed since Lu Yewu had launched her attack until now. 5 seconds. Some people yawned, and when they opened their eyes again, this was the situation. Before they could understand anything, before they could reflect on anything, it had already become like this. Lu Yewu's hands were still numb from being pointed between her eyebrows. She did not understand how Shadow X did it, or rather, she somewhat understood but was unwilling to believe it. Clamping the tip of a blade with 2 fingers? Was it really that easy to clamp? Such a situation had never happened even in the double combat tournament last year. She had to admit that Shadow X was very strong. A blade is a lethal weapon. If you can't activate its murderous aura, it's no different from a soft wooden stick in front of an expert. This was what her father once told her. Was this the situation he was talking about? Click, 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 pack. One Smile Kill pulled the trigger repeatedly in disbelief. Then, the gun in her hand disintegrated and fell to the ground piece by piece. Not a single bullet was missing from the clip. Sillin pressed the tip of his blade closer. One Smile Kill was still far from it. Aflon's bodyguard knew that there was something wrong with his gun even without firing a shot. That was something that could only be detected by those who had played with guns to a certain degree. They would be able to detect even the tiniest of changes, unlike One Smile Kill, who kept pulling the trigger in disbelief. This was the difference between realms. Hesitation, uncertainty, lack of ruthlessness, lack of killing intent when drawing the blade, lack of decisiveness when drawing the gun. This was a student's weakness. As the tip of the knife approached, One Smile Kill, who had only felt a chill before, could now feel blood flowing down the tip of the knife. Although it was only a virtual platform, the inertia and the pain transmitted by the sensors made her feel like she was bleeding. Lu Yewu and One Smile Kill could clearly feel the killing intent coming from the tip of the blade. If they did not admit defeat now, then this generic robot in front of them would really make them bleed in the arena. That would make them look even worse. Less than a minute had passed since the start of the match. One of them had lost both of her blades, and the other had not fired a single shot. Although they were very unwilling, the reality was right there. One Smile Kill and Lu Yewu admit defeat. The winner of this match is Knight and Shadow X. Many people were silent when they saw the words that popped up on the screen. To be exact, they had yet to react. Bull withdrew his gaze and sat in his chair, deep in thought. Shadow X had purposely pushed Lu Yewu back, or else he wouldn't have been so slow. However, what Boar didn't understand was that Shadow X clearly could have killed Lu Yewu in one hit. As long as that palm strike was just a little bit faster, Lu Yue wouldn't have had the time to react and block the attack, and Lu Yue would have basically lost all of her combat strength once the attack landed. Moreover, since he could easily dodge Lu Yue's saber shadows and find the gaps between them, he could also dodge one smile kill spear. The speed of Lu Yue's saber was very fast. Ordinary people would not even be able to distinguish the real shadow in the saber shadow. Since Shadow X was able to dodge Lu Yue's twin blades and attack through the gaps between them, Boar absolutely refused to believe that he couldn't dodge one smile kill's gun with that kind of speed and ease. In truth, a lot of people did not understand why Shadow X would use such a method to win this match. This method was a little cheap, a little despicable, and even took advantage of the system's loopholes. Why did it take advantage of the system's loopholes? Shadow X's current generic robot body was relatively thin and not very tall. This way, it was very advantageous for him to hide beside Lu Yue and avoid one smile kill's attack points. If it was his main body, perhaps one smile kill would still be able to find the attack points. There were also people who posted on the Sector Championship forums, accusing Shadow X of being too despicable and cruel. Not only did he win through tricks, he even used such a method to humiliate the two beauties. Both their blades were snatched away, not a single shot was fired, and their own blades were even pointed at their own glabella and neck. How could one smile kill and Lu Yue endure this? When they saw this post, Kamas and Feng Haichao only smiled mockingly. If Shadow X really didn't hold back, how could one smile kill and Lu Yue only be like this? Everything else aside, just the blade that was pointed at Lu Yue alone. That blade could have directly slashed down from above. However, Shadow X obviously left the other party some face. He retracted his blade a little and merely pointed it at Lu Yue's glabella. If it was night, he wouldn't care if you were a man or a woman or who you were. He would have sliced you in half with a single slash. What do you think? Kamas, who was in front of the microcomputer, asked Feng Haichao. Feng Haichao twirled his hat and said, "He's just playing. He's just playing. It's not just Shadow X, it's the same for Night." Up until now, Night has yet to use Thunderstorm Fist. No one knows to what extent Night's Thunderstorm Fist has been trained. Night's strength is indeed hard to estimate if Ji Feihong thinks so highly of him. Yulu, what do you think? Kamas looked at Yulu, who had been sitting there and playing with his gun. Yulu did not participate in the duel. In fact, he did not even register his account on the Sector Championship platform for the past 3 years since he entered the military academy. However, Yulu was someone that even Kamas and Feng Haichao admired greatly. The first military academy sharpshooter, Yulu's name resounded throughout the entire Sector C. The reason why Yulu had never been interested in the Sector Championship was because there was no shooting competition on the Sector Championship platform. Yulu's head was lowered and his eyes were drooping. He looked like he was asleep, but his hands were not slow at all. When a handgun was tossed into the air, it was in parts, but when it landed back on the ground, it was perfectly assembled. Moreover, Yulu was only playing with the gun with one hand. His finger movements were so fast that even Kamas had to admit his inferiority. Yulu's other hand was supporting his chin, giving off an impression of laziness, as if he would sleep whenever he was tired. However, those who knew Yulu knew not to provoke him even when he was asleep. Many people had seen Yulu playing with his gun like this even when he was asleep, and when a soccer ball was kicked at him, he instinctively shot it and exploded it. Hearing Kamas' question, Yulu spent a great deal of effort to open his eyelids and look at Kamas. What did you say? He had only heard it as a question just now. Kamas and Feng Haichao. As expected, this fellow fell asleep again. Feng Haichao rubbed his forehead helplessly. Kamas is asking about your opinion of the match just now. Opinion? Yulu scratched his face with the hand supporting his chin. Shadow X is very strong. It's really not easy to make you say the words very strong. What else? Feng Haichao asked again. Yulu yawned and stretched. I only watched Shadow X, meaning that he did not look at the others at all. As expected, the other 3 people in the arena were ignored again. Sai, why was it again? Yulu stood up from his chair. With a flick of his fingers, the gun that was still parts just now fell into his hand. He skillfully stuffed the gun into his wide trouser pocket. Every time they saw Yulu put the gun into his wide trouser pocket, Kamas and Feng Haicao's eyes would twitch uncontrollably. Bro, aren't you afraid of misfiring? That's very close to his crotch. Yulu stretched his arms for a bit and let out another big yawn. Then, he lazily walked to the microcomputer and pulled up the battle footage he recorded just now. He slowed down one of the clips and pointed at one of Shadow X's movements. He's the second person I've seen in my age group who can use a gun like that. Feng Haichao and Kamas moved closer. It was the scene of Shadow X snatching Lu Yewu's twin blades and pointing them at Lu Yewu and One Smile Kill. When Shadow X pointed his blade at One Smile Kill, there was a moment when his hand brushed past One Smile Kill's gun. After that moment, One Smile Kill pulled the trigger, but no bullets were fired. At the same time, Shadow X's blade was placed beside her carotid artery. In other words, Shadow X had moved One Smile Kill's gun in that instant, but One Smile Kill did not notice it at all. With such hand speed, and with a single hand holding a blade, he could dismantle a gun. No wonder Yulu said that Shadow X was very strong. Feng Haichao and Kamas stared thoughtfully at the screen for a while. When they came back to themselves, they asked curiously, "You said that Shadow X is the second person you've seen in your age group who can use a gun like that. Then who's the other one?" Yulu walked leisurely to the storage cabinet to grab some food. He was hungry after a nap. "There's another one from Sector B. His name is C.I. Jincheng." Chapter 60. No matter how the others discussed the match, Silin and the others did not care. As usual, they continued to do their own things after the match was over. The moment the match was over, Lung immediately called Silin and Knight's communicator. Judging from his high-pitched voice and two eyebrows that were about to fly off, he must have gained a lot this time. The truth was as such. Lung was so happy that his mouth was cramping. The odds of the previous few bets weren't high, and he didn't earn much money. But this time, Lung bet that Shadow X would win in 1 minute and the opponent wouldn't fire a single shot. The odds were very high, and Lung bet all four of their money on it. After the match was over, Lung's mouth couldn't close even once when he saw the amount on his card. This was also why Silin chose to win in such a way. After the match was over, the Sector Championship forum was filled with posts related to the match. The news of Pride winning the mech battle and entering the quarterfinals was directly trampled down to the ground. There were praises and criticisms, but there was one point that resonated with everyone, and that was the match ended too quickly. It was less than a minute from the start of the system's announcement to the end of the match, and within this 1 minute, both sides had actually fought for less than 5 seconds. What kind of concept was 5 seconds? Some people just turned their heads away and chatted for a bit, and when the screen cut back to them, they discovered that the match was over. I shouldn't have. There was a deep depression that felt like the match was over the second they closed their eyes and opened them again. Although they could watch a recording, watching a live broadcast and a recorded broadcast were two completely different moods. They had completely lost that kind of nervous and excited feeling. Therefore, after this match, everyone came to a conclusion, and that was to never slip away when watching Shadow X's gladiator fights in the future. Even a second could mean missing out on an exciting killing blow. Following Shadow X's performance in this match, some analytics-loving people began to analyze Shadow X's strength and his personality in real life from many aspects. But they still couldn't come up with a conclusion. There was just too little information about Shadow X. It was because of this that some people began to offer a high bounty for the truth about Shadow X. The moment this bounty was announced, the people of Seven Lights were in an uproar. In reality, before the other people of Seven Lights were officially in an uproar, less than 2 seconds after the bounty was announced, Silin's communicator rang. "Silin, don't ruin your future for a little bit of money." As soon as he connected, he heard Lung howling at the top of his lungs. Silin pulled the communicator away a little and looked at the 7-digit bounty on the forum. "You call this a little bit of money?" Without waiting for Silin to say anything, Lung's lips moved nonstop, carrying out a long-term analysis and macroscopic explanation to Silin. In conclusion, if he were to reveal his identity now, it would be disadvantageous to the bet. Silin picked his ear. Got it. I'm not planning to stand out right now. That's good. Lung heaved a sigh of relief. I'll go and study the situation of the next bet. You can continue working. Beep. Sillin looked at the disconnected communicator and curled his lips. This bastard. He put the communicator aside and began to assemble the parts on the desk. Sillin had modified the study a little, turning it into a dual-use study and workshop. He had a fight in the sector championship, but he also had to complete the mission that Sir Mo had assigned to him. Otherwise, with Sir Mo's awkward temperament, he would definitely feel that he was being neglected. If that happened, then Sillin could forget about participating in the sector championship. While he was assembling the parts, the dormitory's doorbell rang. Normally speaking, the doorbell of Sillin's dormitory would never ring. There had been no visitors until now. Even if there were, they would bring them in personally. For example, Surt and Hard. After that mission, Knight had brought them to the dormitory for a drink. As for Pride, unless you personally invite him, that fellow will not deign to pay you a visit. After the doorbell rang a few times, Knight turned on the dormitory's intercom and said from upstairs, Sillin, I'm about to challenge that brat Pride to a mech fight right now. Knight meant that he was busy and did not have the heart to open the door. The more subtle meaning was that if you are busy too, please ignore it. Sillin did not stop what he was doing immediately. He had the security system turn on the screen to show who the visitor was. When Sillin saw the person on the screen, he smiled slightly. He's here so soon. That's fine too. Save you guys the trouble of guessing blindly. The people of Seven Lights had always been extremely curious about Shadow X's identity. To think that such an expert was hiding in their school. The bounty aside, right now Shadow X was the most mysterious and highly watched person on the Sector Championship platform. If they could find out Shadow X's true identity and reveal it himself, then their fame would rise greatly as well. To find out Shadow X's true identity and hack into the Sector Championship platform system? Unlikely. The Sector Championship platform system was jointly built by the professionals of Sector B and Sector C. Its defenses were incredibly strong. If hacking didn't work, then what about connections? Some people who relied on their good background tried to establish a connection with the Sector Championship platform's maintainers, but they could not come to a conclusion. Although the Sector Championship platform's maintainers could not publicly reveal a student's information, they could still investigate it. However, they discovered that Shadow X's information was protected by many layers of additional protection, and those complicated procedures were very difficult to decode. Since neither of these two methods worked, then the most direct way was to look for Knight. Moreover, Knight was the kind of person who dared to flip a table and pull out a gun even in front of Seven Lights' headmaster. Moreover, he had a very deep military background. Everyone knew this, so even though they were very curious about Shadow X's identity, not many people dared to ask Knight directly. Although they dared not provoke Knight, there was one thing that many people knew, and that was the four most awesome people in Seven Lights' dormitory. Beating around the bush should work, right? No one dared to provoke Knight, and C.I. Jincheng was not on Planet Seven Lights. Ask Andrira Lung? No, they would be fooled until they couldn't even tell their feet from their head. If that was the case, then they could only look for Dewant Sillin. The first person to inquire about Shadow X was none other than Alan, his family's electronic magazine owner. Alan had already guessed Shadow X's identity from the moment Shadow X entered the Sector Championship platform's top 3 in just 3 days, but he never came to a conclusion. Later, when Shadow X teamed up with Knight to participate in the double combat tournament, Alan once again began to suspect the possibility of Sillin being Shadow X. Sillin led Alan through the door, but did not let Alan sit in the living room. Instead, he brought him to his own study. Sillin, the Boston ivy outside your dormitory is growing really well. It's just as the rumors say. Alan chose a starting topic. It's just a coincidence. Sillin passed a cup to Alan. There are fruit juice, milk, beer, tea, and so on in the water dispenser. Pour whatever you want, don't be shy. Okay. Alan looked at Sillin's study while he was collecting the fruit juice from the water dispenser. There weren't a lot of books, and parts were piled on the table. The other places in the study were also filled with sorted parts. Seeing that Sillin had sat down beside the table and was assembling the parts again, Alan felt a little embarrassed, as if he had disturbed Scylla's work. About that, I'm sorry to have disturbed you. It's fine. I can talk when I'm assembling parts. Scylla turned his head and said to Alan. His hands were still moving quickly, proving that he was not lying. Alan admired Scylla. He knew who Scylla's current instructor was, and he must have genuine talent to be able to follow Professor Mo. However, when he saw Scylla assembling the parts with his own eyes, Alan had a different feeling. He truly felt as if he was looking at an elegant piece of art. Scylla's hands were moving very quickly and precisely. The parts could be seen jumping between his fingers, and he was assembling them in the next moment. As he watched, Alan began to get lost in thought, as if he'd been sucked into the whirlpool formed by Scylla's fast hands and those parts. Although he was still watching Scylla's hands assembling the parts, Alan's eyes had already begun to lose focus. Alan would never have thought that he would be unknowingly hypnotized just by watching Scylla's assembling movements. Chapter 61. Scylla shook his arms and looked very tired. I've finally assembled another one. All right, Alan, are you hungry? Although Alan was completely hypnotized right now, and Scylla could completely understand the opinions and speculations of the other people in 7 lights about Shadow X from Alan's mouth, Scylla did not ask Alan anything about Shadow X. For a person like Alan, talking about those things might cause Alan's subconscious to rebound, and it would appear that Scylla was hiding something. The crowd continued to struggle over Shadow X's true identity, but the sector championship was still going on. Knight was the only one who fought in the last 2 matches, but he was forced to use Thunderstorm Punch at the very last moment of one of the matches. Although it was just a fish shadow with lightning, and he did not use Thunderstorm Punch in its entirety, it was enough to excite some of the students. TCH, Knight's face was full of disdain. You may look like a decent kid, but you're actually very evil and full of evil ideas. Those people who were tricked by you are still laughing and counting their money for you. When he was assembling in front of Alan, Scylla's hand speed couldn't be considered fast. It was much slower than when he was assembling in front of a Mohang. The reason he slowed down was so that Alan's eyes could keep up with his hand speed. Crack. Alan carefully looked at the stony-faced knight. As expected, he was terrifying. No wonder those people did not dare to ask him directly. Ahem. I'm sorry to disturb you. I'm here to look for Scylla. Scylla's voice turned deep as he said unhurriedly, These parts must be assembled today. This is the mission my instructor gave me. There are a lot of parts, aren't there? Scylla, there's no need to trouble yourself. I'll leave after a chat. In reality, what Scylla said to Alan was not false. It could only be said that it was a little one-sided. Alan woke up to the sound, and he saw a fully assembled machine on the table in front of his eyes. Scylla had moved it into a big box, and there were already a few similar machines inside the box wrapped in shockproof bags. Looking at the date written on the shockproof bags, Alan blushed with shame. It looked like Scylla was really busy from day to night. Although he was a little absent-minded, Alan remembered what Scylla had said to him and how he had answered. Looking at those spare parts and the assembled machinery in the study again, Alan felt that he was worrying too much. There was no way Scylla was Shadow X. Didn't he see how busy he was? He had only mentioned that Professor Mo did not wish for him to participate in the sector championship, but he had not mentioned whether he would participate or not. As for the fact that he didn't see Knight often, but was very familiar with him, well, it was true. Before the sector championship, aside from that mission, most of the time, they kept in touch through the communicator. Even during the few days of the sector championship, Knight would return to his study right after the tournament to start working on the mission Mo Hung had given him. They would only see each other for less than an hour every day. The further they went, the stronger the opponents they would meet. Although the system assigned them randomly, some of the veteran powerhouses and teams with high win rates would still be separated so that they would not meet each other too early. However, with the appearance of the top 32, the flames of war in the sector championship were officially ignited. This was because after the top 32 had been decided, the fighters would draw their own lots. It was possible that the first match would be an extremely strong fight against an extremely strong one. After staring at the jerky in Alan's hand for a moment, Knight wandered into the kitchen to get some food. He was obviously hungry after challenging Pride's fighter. However, when he saw Alan sitting in the living room, Knight's face immediately darkened. "What's going on? Let's go to the living room." As he spoke, Sillin opened the storage cabinet in the study, only to find a small bag of red bean buns lying all alone inside. "You want to ask about Shadow X, don't you?" Sillin interrupted Alan's words. "I can't say anything about Shadow X. I've promised them." The human brain was a very peculiar thing. Humans only had a small understanding of the brain. Even when the other party was hypnotized, one should not be presumptuous enough to think that one had complete control over the other party's thoughts. Different people had different ways of dealing with it. This was what Jinya had told Sillin when he was teaching Sillin about hypnosis. "I gave him the jerky in his hand. He didn't take it himself. There's still a lot of them in the storage cabinet. Don't be so stingy," Sillin said calmly. "Yeah, there are a lot of parts. I spend most of my time assembling these parts every day. I don't have much time to do anything else." Sillin's hand movements were still the same as before. "My mentor, Professor Mo, doesn't like me to participate in the sector championship." It was only when Alan looked at the time again that he realized that more than 2 hours had actually passed. When he thought back, the only thing he could remember was Sillin assembling the parts. He actually stared at Sillin assembling for 2 hours straight. That was why Sillin had only used a curvilinear method and told Alan some seemingly irrelevant things. He wanted Alan to deduce the conclusion that Sillin could not possibly be Shadow X from these things. Alan's hand trembled when he saw Knight. He could feel the anger emanating from Knight's body. Could it be that Knight did not like visitors? Alan let out 2 dry laughs. "It's mainly because we were too curious. We didn't even know that there was such an awesome person in Seven Lights." Due to Sillin's deliberate misdirection, Alan had indeed excluded Sillin from the scope of his suspicion. It looked like Sillin was in a difficult position, so the people of Seven Lights had shifted their target. Then, when Alan placed his attention on the movements of Sillin's hands, Sillin's assembling movements began to change slowly. Without Alan noticing in the slightest, Alan's hand speed changed in a regular pattern. Matching this rhythm, the specific jumping of the parts and the trajectory of his hand shadows, Alan's consciousness was slowly drawn into a whirlpool. Alan nodded, but his eyes were still unfocused, as if he was in a half-asleep, half-awake trance state. "Thanks." Alan accepted the jerky and water cup from Sillin. He paused for a moment before asking, "Have you logged onto the Sector Championship platform before, Sillin?" 20 of the top 32 groups were from Sector C, 3 were from the 10 trade sectors, and 9 were from Sector B. The opponent Sillin and Knight encountered in the top 16 out of the top 32 was a group from the 10 trade sectors. It was also the group with the best record out of the 3 trade sectors groups. Just like Sillin's group, they maintained a perfect record. "Thank you for the compliment. That bastard aura of yours was too strong. I couldn't stand it, so I ran away immediately." "Alan, is this the point? I knew I was overthinking things. A person as big as him can't even compare to a bag of jerky." While they were talking, Knight came bouncing down from upstairs while humming a little tune. It looked like he had won the fight against pride. Knight did not see Alan's figure when he came out. He left so soon. Sillin said that he promised them and not him. This further convinced Alan that Sillin was not Shadow X. The them should be referring to Knight and Shadow X. Sillin threw a bag at him. "What do you mean by what? Do I look that bad to you?" Sillin took out 2 bags of jerky from the kitchen storage cabinet and handed one to Alan. "Don't give me that. When did you become so bashful? This jerky is not bad. Try it. You're overthinking. I'm just impressed by my extraordinary logical reasoning ability. What did you do to that kid?" Knight sat on the sofa and swung his legs while chewing on the jerky and asked, "I'll let you in on a secret. Although Shadow X and Knight are very familiar with each other, they don't meet often." While Knight went to the kitchen, Alan immediately stood up and excused himself. He felt prickles all over his body the moment he saw Knight. Knight's aura was too strong. Chapter 62. The team that Sillin and Knight were about to face was a little special. They came from the 10 trade sectors, and those who could stand out in the 10 trade sectors were definitely not inferior to some of the people from the military academies. Another special characteristic was that there was a non-average human in this team. His ID was Octopus, an octopus. His name was the same as his own, but he had 2 more pairs of hands than the average human. Furthermore, the octopus were more robust, belonging to the category of strength and speed. His performance in the previous matches had been very eye-catching, but Sillen's attention was on the other person in this team. ID Koi behind the smile. Although he had attacked many times in the previous matches, his performance was far less eye-catching than Octopus. Sillen had a feeling from watching the recordings of the previous matches that this person was definitely not inferior to Octopus. He was also a rather low-key person. This feeling of Sillen's was confirmed during the Sector Championship Platform Tournament. Koi behind the smile, and Octopus entered the arena before Sillen and Knight. Octopus was moving his body. His 6 arms were very eye-catching, and Sillen noticed that his 6 arms had a wide range of movement and were very agile. It would be a little troublesome to find an attack point from behind. Unlike Octopus, Koi behind the smile stood there quietly. When he saw Sillen and Knight enter the arena, Koi behind the smile raised his hand in a greeting gesture. However, after seeing Koi behind the smile's gesture, Sillen narrowed his eyes. When Koi behind the smile raised his arm, his fingers moved slightly. The others would not notice. Forget about whether they could capture that momentary movement. Who would notice the minute movements of a person's fingers when he raised his hand in greeting before the match had even begun? But Sillen's habits prevented him from overlooking every minute movement of his opponent, especially the fingers. Never ignore a hunter's finger. Even if they only had 1 finger, they could easily kill someone without being noticed. Koi behind the smile's finger movement was the secret code of the 6th team of Vanguard. So, Sillen made a hello gesture. Similarly, when he raised his hand, his fingers also moved rapidly. Koi behind the smile was momentarily surprised. Not bad, he figured out so quickly. Originally, he did not expect Sillen to be able to see the hidden meaning behind that gesture. As expected of someone that the captain thought highly of. You deal with 8 arms, I'll deal with the other 1, Sillen said to Knight. Knight raised an eyebrow. This wasn't how the previous arrangement was supposed to be, but since Sillen said so, Knight didn't object. He wondered how Lung's reaction would be after the match ended. After both sides were ready, the system displayed a countdown of 10 seconds. During these 10 seconds, while Coquettish Smile was stretching his arms, Shadow X was also stretching his limbs. While the 2 of them seemed to be warming up for the match, they had already communicated with each other more than 10 times. Their fingers moved very quickly, and in an instant, they had completed hundreds of secret codes. Eyesight, mental arithmetic, and reflexes were all conditions that had to be met. If any of them could not keep up, there would be a gap in communication. Capturing the hundreds of codes made by the other party in an instant, then converting these codes into information, processing the information, and then responding to the other party. This was a test of a person's ability. However, after the match officially began, the 2 of them stopped communicating with each other. After all, the surveillance on the Sector Championships platform would be a lot stricter when the match officially began, and they would officially record the match. As for those warm-up activities before the match, they wouldn't be recorded. This was also why Coquettish Smile chose to communicate with Sillen at that time. Knight immediately rushed up and fought 8 arms. There weren't many octopus in the army, and it was very rare to see one. But since he was able to meet an octopus here, Knight couldn't let go of this great opportunity. This was a new attempt. Knight was very excited as he fought, and 8 arms was obviously about the same. The more they fought, the more excited they became, and the faster they fought. 8 arms certainly had the strength. When lightning appeared in Knight's fists, 8 arms still seemed to be holding back. Compared to Knight and 8 claws, Shadow X and Coquettish Smile side were also fighting very quickly and fiercely, but they didn't look as flashy as Knight's Thunderstorm Punch, nor did they look as special as 8 Claws' 6 arms. Coquettish Smile and Shadow X's fight couldn't be said to be boring. Every move they made could be used as a teaching demonstration, but Boar and the others just felt that it was very strange and awkward. It wasn't Shadow X's style in their imagination. 8 Arms' performance gradually faltered under Knight's fierce offensive. After being pushed back by Knight's punch, Eight Arms and Coquettish Smile chose to surrender. Knight obviously felt that the fight wasn't over yet, and he was very dissatisfied when he heard the system's voice announcing the end of the match. He felt that Eight Arms could still hold on and shouldn't be at this level. During the clash with Eight Arms, he felt the endurance of Eight Arms' muscles. Although Knight was confident that he could win against Eight Arms if the fight continued, Knight was a little dissatisfied that Eight Arms surrendered just like that. To put it bluntly, he hadn't fought enough. Although the match looked very exciting and dazzling, he felt that something was missing. Something's wrong. In front of the microcomputer, Kama said with a frown. Feng Haichao nodded. It feels a little flashy, but impractical. Although both sides fought with great vigor and intensity, it's not what we wanted to see. Maybe our expectations are too high. Regardless of how this match was received, Coquettish Smile and Eight Arms had completed their mission. Both of them were members of Vanguard Division 6, and because they met the age requirement, they were sent to the academy by Schotten to study. Normally, hunters wouldn't participate in these matches, but this time, Schotten had the two of them bring a message to Sillin. A very important message. Assassination, Level 1 alert. Assassination, Level 1 alert. This was what Coquettish Smile wanted to convey to Sillin. As for what rank they got, whether they won or lost, they didn't care. They weren't interested either. After the match ended, Sillin immediately received a complaint from Lung. Due to the last-minute change in battle plan, Lung had earned a lot less money this time. However, Lung didn't ask Sillin's reasons for doing so, and continued to analyze the next match. Knight didn't feel satisfied after the match, so he went to the fighter jet training field to pick out fighter jets with some people from the military academy. Many of these people were Knight's former classmates, and after watching the match, they would gather again to pick out fighter jets and armor. This was something they used to do when they were still in the intermediate education school, but now that they were in the advanced education school, they had much less free time. Now that they finally had the Sector Championships platform, they definitely had to make the most of their time. However, Knight never revealed Shadow X's true identity, and because of this, he was even surrounded and killed by a few of his friends at the fighter jet training field. Knight, I'm going out for a walk, and I'll drop by the supermarket on the way. There's no stock in the cabinet. Do you want me to bring anything? Asked Sillin as he pushed open the door. Just bring me an extra portion of whatever you want to buy. Buy more jerky. Knight roared without turning his head. He was now fighting hard with a few friends from the military academy at the fighter jet training field, and he had to get his revenge for the ambush from the last time. Sillin walked out of the dormitory. He suddenly felt a little stuffy today, so he came out for a walk and a breath of fresh air. That was why he didn't use the delivery method. Right now, it was nighttime, and there weren't many people around, but the supermarket was open day and night. However, Sillin hadn't taken a few steps when his communicator rang. There was no image, only an encrypted message, a line of words, and a picture. The picture indicated a certain place in the forest between Seven Lights Business District and Entertainment District, Sleepless City. Teresa is in our hands. You have 1 hour. Chapter 63. The message disappeared automatically after it was displayed, and the signal could not be traced. It seemed that this group had made ample preparations. An hour. The other party did not give Sillin any extra time to prepare at all. Moreover, it was 3 days earlier than Coquettish Smile said. Sillin returned to the accommodation, took out the modified hoverboard, and left a message on the message machine. If he could not return by then, the message machine would tell Knight what to do. Sillin did not bring his communicator. It was too easily exposed. After the modification, the hoverboard was installed with a silencer drive, and its energy system was improved as well. Sillin stepped on the hoverboard and flashed into the night, flying towards the location marked on the map. At a certain academy dormitory in Sector D of the 10 trade sectors, Coquettish Smile sat inelegantly on a chair and was talking to his communicator. I've already passed the message over. He should know what to do. The Coquettish Smile and 8 Tentacles had joined the Sector Championship purely for fun. Although most hunters did not participate in that kind of competition, 8 Tentacles and Coquettish Smile were just too bored. Moreover, the incident with Shadow X before the start of the Sector Championship had piqued their curiosity, which was why they had signed up. They did not expect to receive a mission to deliver a secret code, and even more surprisingly, the legendary Shadow X was actually their teammate. Coquettish Smile and 8 Tentacles had never planned to perform too well on the Sector Championship platform. They were just too lucky that the opponents they encountered were not strong, and even the military academy students were not strong. That was why they were able to enter the top 32. Even without the mission to pass a secret code, the duo did not plan to continue fighting. Exposing their true strength in front of everyone was not a hunter's way of doing things. As for how far Scylla was going to fight, the duo had no interest in knowing. They did not know what the others said, but Coquettish Smile sat up with a frown. Didn't you say it's 3 days later? All right, I'll pay attention to a situation on the Sector Championship platform. If he doesn't show up by tomorrow, then all right, got it. What's wrong? 8 Tentacles looked at Coquettish Smile, who had been sitting there motionlessly since the call ended. Coquettish Smile sighed. Something happened to the sugar daddy, and the assassination was brought forward. I don't know the specifics, and the spies the captain arranged in 7 Lights could not contact Scylla either. Based on those people's habits, if he doesn't show up for tomorrow's round of 16 advancement, it stands to reason that he won't show up again. If he appears, it would mean that the Blackthorn Assassin organization has completely disappeared from the assassin ranking. Yes, but what are the chances of that happening? He smiled coquettishly without saying a word. Scylla arrived at the edge of the forest between the business district and the entertainment city. After arriving at the edge of the forest, he put away the hoverboard, put his coat and hoverboard into the ring, and rushed into the dense forest. In the depths of the dense forest, 3 people dressed in black were whispering something. Next to them, Teresa was lying there with her hands and feet tied up. Her hair was a little messy, and her body was covered in dust and grass, but her eyes still looked very energetic. She had only suffered some superficial wounds, and everything else was fine. Before they met Scylla, the people of Blackthorn wouldn't kill Teresa just yet. Teresa also knew that it was best for her to be obedient given her current situation. If she were to be discovered with any little tricks, these people would kill her without hesitation. She didn't think that the Duance family would contact the Blackthorn that was almost at the end of its rope. Last time, they failed in their mission to assassinate Scylla, were oppressed by many parties, and were encircled by their peers. Their remaining combat strength was no longer enough for the Blackthorn to remain on the assassin ranking. But when they were almost completely annihilated, Aflon's competitors in the family gave them a helping hand. Although she didn't know the details, Teresa could guess that this matter must have been a deal between the Duance family and the Blackthorn. Without their interference, there was no way that the Blackthorn alone could sneak into Planet 7 Lights so easily. Brown Thorn, how is it? One of them asked. Teresa looked up, but she couldn't see the person's face clearly in the darkness of the night. The person was walking very quickly, but Teresa didn't hear any footsteps at all. It was as if a ghost had floated over. Brownthorn glanced at Teresa, who was lying obediently on the ground without any little tricks before turning back to his companions. That guy has arrived, but according to Eaglethorn, that guy disappeared after he landed on a hoverboard. Disappeared? I can't find him. I can't even detect the hoverboard. It's as if this person never appeared. But Eaglethorn definitely saw that guy come into the forest on a hoverboard just a moment ago. Brownthorn was very puzzled as well. Tiger Thorn, the person who spoke just now, smiled savagely. This young master does have some skill. Otherwise, Soft Thorn and the others wouldn't have failed. The Soft Thorn Tiger Thorn was talking about was the woman who pretended to be a nurse during the biochemical-based mission. What do we do now? Brown Thorn asked. Tell Eagle Thorn and the others to pay attention and not fail miserably. Otherwise, they will learn from Soft Thorn's mistakes. This is our last chance. At the end of his sentence, Tiger Thorn's voice was already filled with dense, killing intent. Blackthorn's leader was being watched too closely by all parties, so he didn't come to Planet 7 Lights with them. Tiger Thorn was in charge of the operation this time, and Brown Thorn was assisting him. Although it had been a while since night had fallen over the school zone and the dormitory zone, night had only just fallen over this part of the forest. After bursting into the forest, Scylla was not in a hurry to find his target. Instead, he silently passed through the forest in search of something. Scylla found what he was looking for at a big tree with lush branches and leaves. There was a hole in the tree trunk, and some little things would fly around the hole from time to time. They were a kind of flying ant different from termites. They were the original inhabitants of Planet Seven Lights, and their bodies were only a few millimeters long. The largest ones were no bigger than a centimeter, and their adult form had wings that were slightly longer than their bodies. Their wings would not fall off either, and they also had well-developed upper jaws. They didn't like light, and they had a wide diet. They were exactly what Scylla was looking for. He sprayed a kind of odorless potion inside and around the hole. When it came into contact with these flying ants, the potion formed a thin crystalline membrane on the surface of their bodies. Then, it slowly turned from a solid state to a gaseous state as time passed. This sublimated gas had no effect on the flying ants, but it was different for the human body. After the human body inhaled this gas, they would exhale another kind of gas that excited these little fellows, just like how a human body inhales oxygen and exhales carbon dioxide. The human body wouldn't feel any discomfort, but they would unwittingly become these little fellows' target. Other than the flying ant nest inside the tree hole, Scylla had found a few other ant nests and treated them in the same way. This was the edge of the forest, and the little fellows would fly deeper into the forest in search of food at night. Moreover, the night wind would carry their scent even further into the forest. Right now, it was just nightfall in the forest, and the little fellows still had plenty of time to move around. On the first day Scylla arrived at Seven Lights, he had paid special attention to these flying ants when he was inspecting the terrain. The forest was the best place to settle a grudge in secret, and it was also the easiest place to avoid satellite surveillance. There were a lot of flying ants in this forest, and Scylla had analyzed them a long time ago and designed this potion based on their physiological parameters. Even Mo Hung didn't know that Scylla had assembled his own medicine synthesizer. If he knew, he would definitely be so happy that he would run out and show it off. This was because a medicine synthesizer required a higher level of precision, and it normally required at least 3 people to assemble it. In reality, this was not the only medicine that Scylla had synthesized. He would only use it when he was free or when he was in a hurry. He would never fight a battle unprepared. Scylla had stored all of these synthesized medicines inside Jinya's leaf-patterned ring. Scylla didn't know how many people were hiding in this forest, but judging from the information he obtained from Koi behind the smile, there were definitely no less than 10. These people were cold, decisive, and most importantly, they hid very well. Infrared detectors could not detect them. Without external support, Scylla would be in a very difficult situation. One careless mistake, and he would lose his life. However, most of the time, the ones who could help us were not necessarily people. Scylla watched the little fellows fly into the distance before he slipped into the forest in a flash. The hunt had begun. Chapter 64. The medicine would not take effect so quickly. After all, this forest was huge. Perhaps many flying ants would not touch those people at all, but a single one of them would cause a chain reaction. Without other backup, Scylla had to complete the preliminary preparations in order to obtain victory in this hunt. Along the way, Scylla would spray the medicine whenever he came across a nest of flying ants, allowing the flying ants to carry the medicine crystals into the depths of the forest and increase his chances of success. Scylla was not in a hurry. Blackthorn's men did not tell him why they wanted him to come within an hour, so he was patiently making preparations. From the moment he received the message to the moment he snuck into the forest, Scylla took less than 50 minutes in total. It was twice as fast as Seven Lights' direct flying car. The place marked on the map was the depths of the forest, and there was no way they could reach there in 10 minutes. Moreover, the other party's goal was obviously not here. The reason they told Scylla an hour was so that Scylla would not have the time to look for help. As long as they could see Scylla's figure within an hour, those people would not care about Teresa. After all, Scylla was their biggest target. They did not have any way to contact him. They knew that Scylla had reached the forest, but they did not show up to explain, negotiate, or communicate with him. They only had one goal, and that was to kill Scylla. The other places in Seven Lights were closely monitored by the security squads, so this was the best place to settle things. Time passed slowly, but Eagle Thorn did not discover any trace of Scylla at all. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. After discovering no abnormalities in the surroundings, Eagle Thorn was about to contact his companions when he raised his hand and discovered that there were a few flying ants on his arm. He shook them off with a light shake, but this was just the beginning. One after another, flying ants flew towards him. His arm, his pants, his back, his mask, flying ants began to fall everywhere. Due to the hasty operation this time, Eagle Thorn did not know this forest well. He thought that he might have accidentally run into a nest of flying ants, so he retreated dozens of meters back. But the situation did not improve. The number of flying ants landing on his mask grew, and it seriously interfered with Eagle Thorn's vision. Just as he was about to wipe it off, Eagle Sting suddenly felt a sense of danger. This was an instinct that had been cultivated from many years of experience. Eagle Thorn quickly jumped away from where he was and dodged a few times. However, the angles of the needles flying toward him were too tricky, and they were not in a straight line. They were very fast, and Eagle Thorn managed to dodge the first few needles. However, one of the needles still managed to pierce through his arm and cut through his skin, leaving 2 holes in his camouflage suit. It was a kind of needle with 3 sharp points protruding from 3 sides. However, when these needles pierced into tree trunks or hit rocks, they would shatter, then slowly melt and disappear. As Eagle Thorn moved swiftly, he took out some medicine and sprayed it on the wound. The medicine quickly formed a layer of membrane around the wound, sealing it and preventing blood from flowing out. It also kept the wound under control so that even if the needle was poisoned, it would not spread too quickly. Eagle Thorn's reaction speed could not be said to be slow, and his movements were also very skillful. He almost did not make a sound, and with a few flashes, he hid behind a large tree, keeping an eye on his surroundings. He still did not discover the other party. Eagle Thorn did not dare to be careless. People nowadays preferred to use guns, and even their Blackthorn preferred to use guns to finish off their targets. However, Eagle Thorn also knew that anyone who could use such an ancient hidden weapon was obviously not a pushover. In fact, Eagle Thorn even felt that Scylla was more like a killer. He was silent, calm, and hiding in an even darker place, watching them. However, Eagle Thorn was only wary of Scylla and ignored the flying ants that were landing on his body one after another. The wound was sealed with medicine, but the 2 holes on the camouflage suit provided the flying ants with a convenient way to enter. Eagle Thorn was starting to feel that something was wrong. The biting of the flying ants was itchy and painful, and it was starting to spread all over his body. One after another, the flying ants landed on Eagle Thorn's body in search of entry points. His shoes, his trousers, the holes that were pierced, and so on. In order to prevent himself from being ambushed again, Eagle Thorn endured the discomfort that was a mixture of pain and itch. He tried his best to calm himself down and ignore those feelings, but he found it harder and harder to control his emotions. Eagle Thorn hoped that Scylla would act quickly so that he could move a little and shake off those flying ants. However, Scylla did not move at all after that, just like a hunter quietly watching a trapped beast struggle. The flying ant's venom was not fatal, but it would stimulate a person's nerves and make them feel anxious. Now, Eagle Thorn was clearly developing in the direction of anxiety. Eagle Thorn knew that the other party was waiting for the moment when he could not endure it any longer and would deliver a fatal blow. However, the feeling of being bitten by thousands of flying ants was truly worse than death. If it was a normal person, they would have long since given up and would rather commit suicide than endure such torture. His mask was full of sweat. Eagle Thorn did not know how long he could endure it. The venom had already begun to stimulate his nerves. Eagle Thorn gritted his teeth, took a deep breath, and ran far away in a flash. Running without a fixed path would allow him to better avoid being targeted by the other party. He had to get rid of those flying ants inside his mask first, or else he would definitely be the one to lose if this dragged on. A flying ant bit through the breathing hole on his mask, and crawled in, burrowing into Eagle Thorn's nostrils. Eagle Thorn's sprinting footsteps came to a halt, and it was also in this instant that a needle pierced through his throat. The fresh blood made these flying ants even more excited, because the flowing blood had a scent that they liked. More and more flying ants landed on Eagle Thorn's body, densely covering the surface of Eagle Thorn's body. Eagle Thorn soon stopped breathing. After determining that Eagle Thorn had lost all signs of life, Sillen scuttled out and walked to Eagle Thorn's side. Eagle Thorn was wearing a special camouflage suit that was infrared resistant and would change color depending on the environment. Eagle Thorn had a silenced gun in his hands, but Sillen did not touch it. This gun had been modified, and there was a miniature self-destruct device installed inside. Sillen did not want to keep a bomb by his side. Sillen found another infrasonic gun on Eagle Thorn's body and put it away after giving a look. You could take this one. In the depths of the forest, Tiger Thorn's expression was very gloomy because the light representing Eagle Thorn on his life watch the size of a pocket watch had gone out, which meant that Eagle Thorn was dead. Eagle Thorn has fallen. How is this possible? Brown Thorn ran over and looked at the life watch in Tiger Thorn's hands. Looking at the extinguished light, Brown Thorn paused for a moment. I'll go take care of that guy. Since even Eagle Thorn had fallen, then the others might not necessarily be able to get away with it. He could only do it himself. The person beside Tiger Thorn stopped Brown Thorn and said, "No need, Brown Thorn. I'll go with Snake Thorn. There's no need for you to do anything." Tiger Thorn nodded in agreement. After the two of them left, Tiger Thorn looked at another extinguished light that on his life watch and turned to look at Teresa, who was lying on the ground.